I have to say. But before that became too distant, I really wanted to say a few words that came to me from people who didn't really want to appear on the Zoom chat. It's just not their thing. These two people are New Zealand passionate supporters of Julian Assange. We've just heard from Susanne Tinari, which was brilliant to see. I've never seen her to speak before, and I couldn't be more proud of what she's amazingly done with 1,500 journalists signing Speak Up for Assange. And Nikki Hager, our New Zealand investigative journalist who exposed John Key and also was rather badly harassed by the New Zealand government, frankly, and paid out quite a compensation by the police for unlawful searches, confiscations of his journalistic materials. And so anyway, Nikki Hager is really a sort of a dissenter and a really special voice in New Zealand. And you couldn't get more of a contrasting person than the other person I'm going to read out a message from. But I really hold him in high regard too. He's just been demonetized on YouTube. He's got an awful lot of stories right, and I know a lot of people would call him a conspiracy theorist, but we know how many turned out to be true, often revealed through real data and WikiLeaks. But yeah, his name is Ed, and that's all we know him by. He's Anon, that's why he doesn't like appearing on streams, but he does do regular broadcasts, and he's now lost all his earnings. He has been reporting on COVID and calling out WHO and misinformation on COVID actually from the very beginning, way before anyone was taking it seriously. And I think it's appalling that he's been effectively censored and he can't post on his channel anymore. So those are the two people that I wanted to read out a statement from. And I'm going to start first with Nikki Hager, New Zealand's foremost investigative journalist. He sent this to me, actually, admittedly, he sent it to me as a special statement to read out on our 11th of April New Zealand virtual march, which was really, really, really good, a show, because it was really focused on supporter strategy. It was a long stream, but it covered some really good issues. So he actually wrote this for that, but I rang him this week and asked if he'd like me to read it out again, and he thought it would still be appropriate for World Press Freedom Day. So from Nikki Hager. Nikki Hager, New Zealand's top investigative journalist, worked with WikiLeaks and also helped Serena Tarani from Switzerland, who you've just seen, helped instigate the Speak Up for Assange statement from Julian, signed by 1,500 of the world's best journalists, including Chris Hedges, John Pilger, Daniel Ellsberg, Noam Chomsky, and we already read it out, as I said, and this is what he said. I send these words to add my voice to the people around the world supporting Julian Assange in his time of great danger. Julian is in the news at the moment because of his ongoing abuses of his human rights, but I want to acknowledge him as history will remember him, one of the genuinely important people of our era. He's had a major impact on world politics since he dreamed up the idea of WikiLeaks 14 years ago. Through force of personality, intelligence, and hard work, he made WikiLeaks into something that could change the world. He's a great innovator who tried to answer the question of how publics around the world could be informed about the actions of the powerful in an era of increasing secrecy. The great whistleblowers of our times are, I believe, in part following his footsteps. At the moment, he is facing punishment precisely because of some of his most important achievements. The huge leaks on Afghanistan and Iraq wars, and the State Department cables. Powerful forces are at work against him. He badly needs people to stick up for him. Part of the retaliation against him has been blackening his name. But Mandela was once denigrated as a terrorist. Daniel Ellsberg of the Pentagon Papers had his personal life attacked. But history remembers them well, and I believe the same will be the case with Julian. I look forward to the day when he's a much respected elder, invited to speak at human rights conferences. But for now, he's under attack, and he needs and greatly deserves our support. So that was the statement from Nikki Hager from 11th of April that we did read out once before, but I thought it was worth sharing again. And now this is quite a long piece by Ed, and I'm sure he was going to make a video for us, but he said I'd be better at reading out, of course. So as I said, Ed was from Outer Light Channel, Outer Dark Channel, and Esoteric Detective, which are 3 completely different channels, which are really, really worthy of, you know, being kept alive on YouTube, I believe, and have called out a lot of truth, particularly related to WikiLeaks. World Press Freedom Day. What is it really? A funeral? Flowers on an old, once worshipped grave? In today's upside down world, freedom of the press, we are told, is more important than ever. We are told this by lauded world leaders like Hillary Clinton. Clinton, who spoke in support of 2012 World Press Freedom Day, calling for the release of all foreign journalists imprisoned and persecuted, speaking right into the camera, looking right into the viewer's eyes. Of course, we can hardly disagree with that. But Clinton would later also make another call for action. This one was different. This call was for asking if it was possible for the United States to drone strike the publisher and journalist Julian Assange. For what crime, you ask? Well, being a publisher with a dissenting voice. Julian Assange, who to this day still sits in Belmarsh prison for crimes so Kafkaesque that no one can understand them except perhaps the tea leaf reading leadership of the United Kingdom. Although it would seem the leadership also don't understand the irony when they also support World Press Freedom Day year after year after year. The irony so potent you could literally bottle it. The fact is, beyond the theatre, freedom of the press has largely been abandoned in recent times, but that does not mean we should not ask for it to be fully restored. Just like little Oliver Twist, we should ask for more and more and more. But in doing so, we should also be aware of the saddest truth that we're trying to fill our tummies with gruel when the vast majority of us are on the verge of starving. For true freedom of the press is a grand trophy and no doubt worth striving for, but for the vast majority of the public at this moment, they don't even have the right to access information. So what use is a publisher or a journalist if that publisher or journalist cannot be accessed? Like a warehouse full of information that has a padlock placed on it. This is the major problem right now in our world. And just like an approaching darkness, access to information is growing dimmer by the day. Susan Wojcicki, for instance, the CEO of YouTube, recently said she would remove content that didn't come from authoritative news sources. She also went on to say that anything that contradicts the World Health Organization will be removed. The World Health Organization, by the way, who said in January that there was no sign of human-to-human transfer in regarding a pandemic, that a few months later now has 5 billion in effective quarantine. The World Health Organization that recommended keeping travel open in the center of the outbreak. The World Health Organization that at this time does not recommend wearing face masks for the general public. If I tell my friends to wear a face mask, as the prestigious Lancet medical journal recommends, does that make me a dissenter? Does this make me a subversive? Should I be deleted from YouTube, Google, which controls billions of minds because I say something that's not the doctrine of the World Health Organization? Which authority am I allowed to talk about in this authority labyrinth? Another example is the recent reports by Mark Zuckerberg's company, Facebook, which was complicit in censorship in Vietnam of independent news sources. Only government news sources could be accessed by the citizens of Vietnam on Facebook, and Facebook helped gladly facilitate this. Are these examples not classical cases of authoritarianism? These are just a few examples of many, and day by day, we hand in more and more power to those centralized control that we never elected over the bandwidth of information. And day by day, these same unelected people seek to reconstruct the idea of what not only freedom of the press is, but also freedom of access to information. They're slowly changing the idea of speaking truth to the power, to the idea of solely speaking only what the powerful deem as truthful. What kind of world would the future look like? It seems like we're going back to the Middle Ages, to the time of the kings and queens, of the serfs that they ruled over. We never elected these people, and yet they control us. And now, with their new narrative, they tell us we can still sing all we like, as long as we sing praise for the Sheriff of Nottingham. They restrict information every day, they reformulate it, and perhaps the most frightening is in doing so, they're not only shaping laws in their own countries, but also in the hearts and minds of future generations. What will the future look like where children living in an environment are taught that the authority can always delete their posts or control their language, read their personal writings, and the only news they see is from authoritative news sources? What kinds of minds will be developed and graduate from that artificial school? What will they be like? What lens will they see the world with? Is the idea of privacy of thoughts or personal diary under your pillow now some silly old-fashioned idea? What else will turn to vapor? And while we speak of freedom of the press, let's not us speak without saying the press has blood on its hand. They lament press freedoms at the same time they take them away from others. The most heralded news organization, Susan Wojcicki's authoritarian sources, the Washington Post, New York Times, BBC, etc., call daily for more censorship. Of course, not for them, but for others. They say conspiracy theorists, independent news services must be removed from the human thought. Was Russiagate, which was projected by these same sources, the Washington Post, New York Times, BBC, etc., at every turn, not a conspiracy theory that turned out to be false? What is a conspiracy theory? Is it not just a group of people working towards a set outcome? Is that not just human nature? To think about them, does that make someone a demon now? To write about them, does that make someone a heretic? Are they the new witches? Can the priests of the new world see into their dreams, their crimes, and decipher them before a court? Who gives anyone the right to tell another they do not have the same right to do the same? Are we living in the age of the scarlet letter? Will Julian Assange be released from prison? Will he be allowed to go home? The issue of a free flow of information, anti-censorship, is greater than press freedoms. Information is the very thread that weaves our society together. Without it, our society changes into a world with less color, less innovation and expression, less freedom, but also less understanding of what makes us human. Ed. So that was quite a long statement he gave, but I did really like it, and I appreciate it because many stories that he has reported have actually turned out right. And what he has always done for us is promote our protests in New Zealand, and he's probably one of the biggest political show YouTubers that there is. It's not just politics, but yeah, it's one of his interests. So yeah, I just thought that those were two very contrasting pictures of the scenario that we're all in at the moment. So I just wonder if we're ready to unmute you, Alison. How are you doing with your video participation? Are you there? She's still not here. So what I'll do, oh no, she is. She's back.
I am here.
Oh, you are.
Okay. Can I tell you of my technical difficulties? It's saying my video.
Oh, what have I done? I think I've actually just cancelled her or something. And I'm hoping that RSFO is seeing this because I have got some tech help. But if not, I am possibly going to just... so I think I accidentally deleted Alison. Actually, she's going to have to come back into the stream. So while that's happening, I might actually play a video. This is a bit silly because it's a video of me and it seems a bit egotistical sharing a video of me. And I was hoping to talk to Alison about it. So maybe if she'll come back on. It was a strategy that we had last year and it was being discussed on Unity4J quite a bit. We were trying to do anything on World Press Freedom Day. We knew about what was going on and that there was going to be lots of really highly hypocritical conferences and events all around the world. And on the Unity4J Discord, we tried to sort of instigate as many kind of rogue speeches or town hall questions, awkward questions as we could possibly manage. And at the time, Unity4J Discord was really, really busy because everyone was active and we're all working very hard. And one of the concepts was send people out and get them making a scene, because there's some people that don't mind that. I'm not the most diplomatic, but I can go and make a fool of myself quite happily. So that can be useful. So let me just see if I can get over to this one, share a screen for you. You'll just have to bear with me because stop that. Sorry about that. I'm going to have to go behind. It's been playing an autoplay behind my video. It went from deeper to death, race, fortitude. How ridiculous. Anyway, I'll go to my channel, which is Alex Hill's, by the way. I think the German group of Candles for Assange have got a Candles for Assange Germany, or Candles for Assange on YouTube, and they put out a lot of information about protests. And the reason they're not on the stream today is actually that they're having a protest or about to have one. I'm not clear on the time, but if you want to look at the Free Assange Committee Germany, they are posting up stuff about that at the moment. So I am going to go back to sharing my screen again, if I can. And hopefully...
We've focused on lies in the social media, but not those in MSN. I want to point out the brazen hypocrisy of World Press Freedom Day being hosted by the UK government at this dark time.
I mixed in some music.
Julian Assange is being persecuted by war criminals and the corrupt that he exposed, still sitting in positions of power in the government on both sides of the aisle as well as in much of the media.
World Press Freedom! World Press Freedom! World Press Freedom!
Imagine the precedent Trump is setting, that any country could extradite any foreign journalist or publisher and make them subject to draconian laws, possibly the death penalty, just because they publish truth about the government's war crimes. No extradition.
Same thing. World Press Freedom! World Press Freedom!
Imagine if that state was Saudi Arabia. We call on the world media to stand by their award-winning colleague and Nobel Prize nominee.
World Press Freedom! Guys, turn around and get a picture of us all.
Come out and talk to us!
Look after your citizens!
End the smears and lies about an anti-war hero. You want to know how to get people trusting media more? Tell the truth. Stop delivering a one-sided, government-sanctioned narrative. That is what is going on here. Thank you.
In being held for accountable for justice, and it's not, I would say, a media region issue.
Publisher.
Well, the Tightening Guardian has done quite a lot on this question of whether he's a journalist or not, and has concluded that he's not.
And their story on Manafort was a disgrace.
We're not really having that's fine.
Well, what about free speech? We were just talking about that.
We are talking about it. This is also a panel discussion. Any further comments from my panelists?
Protecting their war machine. No, they don't care for democracy. We're protecting all their dodgy schemes. Okay, just make sure you leave enough room.
Yeah, we will. We'll be mindful of that. Thank you. Thank you.
Chasing him yesterday, and he had to throw himself away. He had to take extreme caution because they were very strong. They were chasing him yesterday.
Right, anyway, I'm going to stop that there because it's just going to go on and on with music, and that would be nice, but this is about journalism and we have gone a bit off topic already. So I have lost Alison, and I don't have, oh, I have to send a link to Alison. So do excuse me for a moment. Maybe I will put another song on, actually, after all, and try and get this sorted out. Ah, Alison is back. She's back. So I don't know, Alison, you've got video now, and are you unmuted? Can I unmute you, please? Yeah. Oh, how do I unmute you? Got a slight problem there.
There we go.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, wonderful. So I just spoke a little bit about Nikki Hager, and then I read out Nikki Hager's statement from the 11th of April. And then I just read out Ed's really long but wonderful statement as well. And then I just played the speech. So I was hoping to, because I was just filling in time at the moment really till you came back. But we could talk about that if you wanted to, because I was just saying how we tried. I mean, obviously, last year when we were able to actually protest, what we were doing on Unity 4J was trying to encourage anyone who was not scared of making a fool of themselves. Necessarily, it's not really a fool of themselves, but you got to be that kind of character to kind of go and do a rogue speech. And so we tried to get as much people going out there and doing that. And then my co-founder of Free Assange New Zealand, Greg, he spied a breakfast at the New Zealand Parliament. And so it was sounded like the ideal perfect situation, because it was the British High Commissioner, it was a national MP, a pretty mainstream journalist. She had won actually some kind of award, and she did say encouraging things about not censoring too much, but in general, not much to say. We had another journalist from Unipolitik, I think his Politic with a K on Twitter, Richard Harlan. And then an academic, Andrew Ladley, I believe it was, at the end of the panel. And so it was like a panel full of journalists, media, personally, MPs, and the British High Commissioner cheering it. And I had the Canadian High Commissioner in front of me, and it was fantastic. Like, it was nerve-wracking, but it was definitely a feel-good moment for me. But great. What it was, yeah, it's so sad that we can't do these sort of things now, but it all came out of probably Sydney again. Had Ian Rose, who put on the first talk today, and also came out with the original idea for this. He was the one who originally started talking a lot about World Press Freedom Day, and I think that's what got the discussion going, Unity 4J. And then later on we did our candles thing, and so I had all this connections to all these groups around the world that just done the birthday party for Julian Assange, Candles for Assange, and you see what happened, but I was well connected, so I could basically tell all those people Ian's idea about hijacking a hashtag. And I wasn't very good at getting other people to do rogue speeches. It is a bit difficult to find those opportunities like that, but certainly managed to break a hashtag last year. And I think they were forced to, Ian Rose spoke about it on the 11th of April, but I believe they were forced to change their hashtag to media freedom instead of press freedom, something. But yeah, anyway, I thought I would fill it in with that because it was topical. It was only last year, so.
Fantastic. One of my, if you want to tell, here in London, one of the best things, the most fun things that we did, and I spoke about this on your last thing, but I didn't probably explain it very well, is we found out that Mike Pompeo, Mad Mike, was going to be in town at the Policy Exchange Unit in Old Queen Street. So, 5 or 6 of us went down with banners and everything, and we staked it out. And the big black cars were there, the Range Rovers and the limos and the little entourage of the motorbikes in front, and waited for him to come out the door, but he didn't come out because he was a bit scared of us. So they thought, we'll do a switcheroo. We'll go around to this up, we'll take these cars around and then we'll put them off the scent. And we said, we pretended we were going around where the cars were, and then we had reconnaissance down to the other point, went back. Mad Mike had to come out eventually, and he did. And there were police sort of guarding us to stay on the footpath on the other side of the road, but we didn't look like assassins or any kind of, like violent people. We just had our banners waiting. Anyway, finally he came out, and we just screamed and screamed and screamed our lungs out. CIA scum, war criminal, war criminal, war criminal. And one of our people said, Pompeo, you will rot in hell for what you have done to Julian. You call yourself a Christian, you will rot in hell. So
yeah, get him where it hurts him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And our adrenaline was just so high. And then we went to a coffee shop, and then we were like, oh my God. And then it looked like we were bird dogging them, actually, because coincidentally the entourage came by as we were walking to the pub afterwards, and we checked them. They went to Scotland Yard. So that was really good fun. But your video of that attack of your speech at that meeting was absolutely fantastic. I've retweeted that a few times.
It was incredible what they answered. Richard Harlan was mind-blowing. And I was so frustrated that I couldn't just get up and scream a bit more, but I was already quite nervous that they were going to pull me down while I was speaking. And the reason that video was chopped up that way is because I actually delivered that speech like blah, 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 because I was like, don't take me off, don't take me off. But yeah, I think these things are really powerful. These really hit them. Things where we steal their hashtags and corrupt them with real truth. And then that's the sort of thing where we're breaking out of the algorithm. That's what I'm all about.
Exactly.
I'm not a very good publicist, and I wish I was better, but I wish I could do more of that. But obviously Corona has put a big full stop on that.
Exactly.
I do understand that the German group have actually got permission to protest today on the streets. They took some careful, like they actually took advice and asked how to do it, and they gave them instructions and let them. So that was impressive.
Yeah, that's brilliant. They're doing some great stuff over there whenever they can. We've got a new campaign out called Elephant in the Room, referring to the Nils Melzer quote. And, this is a campaign that's going to last until the UNESCO conference in October, when they actually present the award and da-da-da-da. So, we'll be keeping that hashtag going, and hopefully we get some, some grip on that. But yeah, everything's quite grey here today, and we might be allowed out next week, I think, or soon. But
New Zealand, they have counted. New Zealand, they've gone down to 3 here, which means that you're not really allowed to big groups, but it has got a little bit better for people. Coffee and pick-up shopping, that sort of stuff is beginning to happen. So, I mean, everyone's got a different picture now, and it's going to be very hard as the world is all coming back online, potentially in different formats and states. And it's worrying what's going to happen to dissent in general. And
and also, Julian, because they've got there are 3,000 prisoners now with COVID in UK jails, 300 in southeast of England jails. And
is it still 2 that have died in Belmarsh that have confirmed it?
As far as I know, that's it. But you couldn't trust their figures either. So. If we get word, I'll let you know.
Well, I think it's I think those ideas that we were talking about in the support stream about the clever email systems and ways of cut and pasting and low tech things like printing out letters and getting signatures. I think we've got to really examine some of those ideas again. I think they were great.
I really do think, analogly as well. Analogically.
Fax. Let's fax them all.
because the other day I was out. You can't go too far, so I put my car in the driveway, and I was painting a banner on the because there's not much room here in England. You've got to do it on your car, everything on your car or in your car. So I put a banner on the bonnet and was just painting that and listening to a webcast actually. And a guy my windows of my car have just got posters about Julian and have you did you see this crime occurring when they dragged him out of the embassy, and a neighbour said, I'm not going to come too close, but I just wanted to talk to you about your posters. And I said, yeah, sure. And he goes, I really support, Julian Assange. And I said, fantastic. Write to your MP, who happens to be Bob Neal, who is on the Parliamentary Select Committee for Prisons and Justice. And so, a relevant figure. But our Elephant in the Room campaign is also like to bombard MPs and not only MPs, but journalists mainly, with letters and trying to get editorials written. And
it's a great idea, and it's a great graphic. That is it. Which group produced the graphic? It's fantastic. Was that Bean again?
That was us.
That was you. Fantastic.
the elephant in the room on the UNESCO.
Yeah, like the elephant that doesn't quite fit on the page. It's great.
Yeah, that was Miles. He did that in conjunction with me, and we did the campaign and dreamt it up, and I produced an editorial, which I was just trying to find because I could read it out if we had any time. But and
you feel free to use this how you want to. Yep. You know, you've I presume you're going to share your own. So Richard's going to share his slideshow for us.
He is. He's going to do that. He's in the room. I see.
Cool.
So whenever we're ready, we can probably
I can unmute him, but I don't know. It hasn't put. Oh, maybe he's done it himself. No, he's not coming through it yet. But anyway, so I was just going to say, be as flexible as you like. I've got a 40-minute French video, but I've taken out. I know the French people are not going to be upset with me, but I have just taken out the English bit, and I would have fully played a French session if they were on to have some guests, but they weren't able to get any journalists in the short time that I gave them. So, but fair call, they did a fantastic job of that stream. I don't know if you picked up most of it, but it was
I did, yeah,
something hours long, and the way they did the translation. I mean, talking about small media doing the job of big media, they did a fantastic job. And I mean, I think we can get some great cuts out of that too for both languages. It'll be a really valuable video. Because I mean, their idea was to shout for Julian on that as well. The idea was, you know, be angry if you want to be. So I quite like that. That was a nice format.
The French have been spectacular. The Gilets Jaunes, every time they've come to Belmarsh, they've just like bolstered us so much, and they come in huge numbers, you know, busloads, and singing songs and bringing baguettes and, you know, all sorts of things. So, yeah, they're amazing. They're just so wonderful, you know, just take my hat off to them. You know,
yeah, I mean, I'm feeling really annoyed being so far away. I was very close to coming in May.
Yeah, just as well you didn't book.
That close.
You wasted the money, everything up.
Yeah, my dad is 90 and lives in England, so it's pretty good. Yeah, I really was due to come. So, but yeah, those are the things. But less of the COVID. We've obviously got to stay off the COVID, even though it is big on everyone's mind. Because really today we're supposed to be talking about press, and we can talk about, you know, how the media can help, how we can help the media, how we can correct the media. I think there's lots of good conversations to be had there. So yeah, I've got 40 minutes worth of footage of some French, but the English parts of it towards the end. And
Richard's here now. So
hello, Richard.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, Richard.
Hi.
Wonderful. Thank you for coming on. You've got an ongoing project. You're a photojournalist, and it's called Valid Values, which you documented all of the people in the movement who basically in the Free Assange movement, as I call it, the FAM. And you say you've been supporting this for a while, and you could describe the project yourself. Actually, that's probably best, because I was just going to quote you from your website.
Well, yeah. So I started the project after I saw the images of Julian being dragged out of the embassy. After just right then I felt the urge to do something. And as a photographer, the thing I could do was to make portraits of people, supporters of Wikileaks. And so I just started it in April 2019, approaching people who I thought were interesting. And so during the year, I photographed people, and this turned into Valid Values. Right now there are 20 portraits of people. It's an ongoing project, so there will be more people, but because of COVID-19, this is all a bit delayed now. But yeah, I'm planning to get more people into this project.
You could only do it by selfies now, couldn't you? And that's what you're taking them on.
Yeah.
So you're going to play your gallery for us as well, your slideshow gallery. But when did you see the footage, and where, you know, of Julian being dragged out, and what was that like a moment for you, like a 9/11 moment? You know, you'll always remember where you were when you saw that, and how it affected you.
Yeah, I always followed Wikileaks from the start, so I knew, of course, that the arrest was. Yeah, I mean, there were it was in the news that he was going to be arrested soon, so I followed this a lot, and so we all knew it was coming. So yeah, but it was a shocking experience, I think, for all of the supporters. These images, I don't think I will ever forget them. I mean, it's, yeah.
And it registers to me that when you're looking at the portraits, they're beautiful portraits, and beautiful light you've used in so many of them, under trees, and you know, it must have been summer for a lot of them because it looks quite pretty. But what was your feeling and the mood of the moment in various ones? Was there anyone in particular that struck you as, like, you know, just like, you know, you have those momentous kind of, you know, energy sort of moments where you go, oh, the lights turned on, like, you know, you can really see the beauty in these people. And can you sort of give us a few stories behind the people, the individuals?
Yeah, so I can start a slideshow and talk a bit about the portraits. Or yeah.
Validvalues.org is where you can find the Richard's website, and see them again too. I'll just say that.
Yeah, so I can start a slideshow and then we can talk about some photos. Yeah.
Great, awesome.
So,
oh, John.
John, yeah.
Oh God, he's such a beautiful guy, isn't he?
Yeah, you asked me if there was a special moment. Well, this was a very special moment for me, meeting John. Quite moving and emotional.
Yeah.
And if you look at his statement that he gave about the values, if you want peace, be prepared to fight. I thought this was reflecting a bit the quote of Julian, if wars can be started by lies, peace can be started by truth. And to me, Wikileaks has a 100% accuracy of publishing truthful information. So this is, of course, a way of a bit of fighting, right? Yeah. So yeah, John was really an emotional moment for me.
He's, every time I've met him, I you know, I totally back you up on that. He's just such a beautiful soul. He's just such a beautiful person, and I also love the way that he describes Julian as a child. Obviously, you know, insanely intelligent person. Like, I mean, by that I mean amazingly, compared to, you know, me, but or anyone that I know actually. And he said that, you know, he could present knowledge to you like a gift in the palm of his hand. And you didn't think that, you know, it was like an imposition, or that, you know, he was above you, or he was being arrogant or anything like that. So it always, you know, I always think about that. And every kind of when Julian was doing the World Tomorrow series, you know, from the embassy, his TV show there, I never ever got that impression from him either. The way that he presented knowledge to the world never sort of seemed to me like, you know, I am telling you this and I'm the teacher, or, you know, it just always seemed to be this amazing sharing kind of thing, you know. And I love the way that John expressed that, that he was like that from a very early age, very smart, able to present knowledge in a way that was, you know, laid out the issues in an understandable way about geopolitics, everything, you know, the issues, you know, and, you know, give it to you as a gift and not make you feel like you were lesser. Yeah,
which is not an easy thing to do. It's really a talent.
It is. It shows emotional intelligence of a high degree as well as brains trust. Exactly.
So this one is from Bean. I shot him in Castle Park in Bristol. And this area was heavily bombed during World War II. And but the tower in the background of St. Peter's Church is somehow managed to survive the bombings. And it has now become a reminder of the resilience of the people of Bristol. So this is, of course, also a bit related. When you look at his values, he values compassion a lot, empathy plus action. And this is, I think, reflected in his work as a graphic designer a lot. You can see this.
Definitely.
Yeah, the topics he picks to work on, and of course he's done an amazing work for WikiLeaks and all the support groups. Yeah,
amazing. I could throw in there that when I was a new kid on the block here, we wanted to do a postcard of with the QR code for collateral murder. So one side of the postcard was just the little QR code stamp. You could scan this and see the collateral murder video. On the other side was a message, but I'm not great on word processing programs, and I don't really have that much software. So, you know, and it was a kind of a tiny job, but he said, yeah, sure. And boom, there it was, back again, off to the printers, and we did the postcard. And since then, so many people have done postcards, which is a really amazing little souvenir item to do. A local crew in Greenwich area, Lewisham Greenwich area group, support Assange group, did another one with on the front all of the famous tourist sites. So one being Belmarsh Prison and the most famous person, Julian Assange, in the region, sort of thing. So yeah, but Beam was ever so helpful, and so many graphics that you can pull down and use, and just free to use, download, boom, 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 has made our work just so much easier. And he's just such a lovely, beautiful guy. Yeah, amazing. And Bristol people are different from a lot of other people, and as a group, you know, over here, I found that sort of very open-minded, and there's a collection there that I was hoping one day that, you know, Banksy might put something up on the wall for Julian, you know.
Yeah, it would be great. So this one's NIELS. NIELS, as a filmmaker, focuses on compassion too. Is also working on his PhD about healthcare whistleblowing. So, he emphasizes that health is an important value in the pursuit of the ideal in ourselves, which is a beautiful line, I think. And of course, with COVID-19, we are all reminded of the value of staying healthy and the importance of a good functioning healthcare system. So I'm looking forward to his work on its PhD about healthcare whistleblowing. It might be quite interesting.
Beautiful eyes. Look at his eyes. You can you know, so deep.
You know, true. Yeah.
Oh my God, empathy. Yeah. It's beautiful.
Yeah. This is Suzanne Gilbert. Also, she works in film as well, and as well as an all-round human rights campaigner. And for this shot, we wanted to create a bit of the suffragette look, where the suffragette color scheme, white was the color for purity. And of course, the way she's standing there, it resembles a bit a pure look that she has. The funny thing might be she's also very fond of dogs. And we managed to get a dog into the picture. It's running in the background. So that was a bit of
I'll spot the dog. Oh, yes, there it is. It behind the tree? Yes.
Oh
my God, I didn't notice that before.
No, it's a funny little detail that you have to see. Yeah. So
what sort of dog is that? A poodle? Oh, no. What is it?
No, I don't think so. No, it was just running around there.
Okay. Beautiful. That's a really beautiful shot in that grove of trees. Gorgeous.
Yeah, true. And she found a really inspiring quote of Maya Angelou about courage, of course, very related to WikiLeaks.
Definitely.
Yeah.
We definitely need a lot of courage.
Yeah, yeah.
And we shouldn't be afraid to show it, that we do have courage, then we do have fight, we do have spirit, and we are right, you know? So, yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So talking about inspiring people, this Edith Ballantine. She was the Secretary General of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom for 23 years, and also president for 6 years. And she is 97 now. This is amazing. And she still has a really sharp and active mind. It's, yeah.
This is the lady that we were going to set up on a date with, one of our guys here. Eric, who's huge campaigner, and he's been involved in the peace movement ever since he was very young. He's a teacher, originally from America, but he's 96. So when we saw Edith, we thought, maybe, you never know. But yeah, amazing solidarity and spirit, fight. And Eric, you know, he really wants to get arrested one day, you know. He's there all of the time, you know, at every vigil, every kind of event that was, you know, that we host, that we, you know, attended. He was always there at the forefront, going to the PLO marches, everything. Eric is always there, 96. You can't knock him down. No, it's great. She looks amazingly, you know, spirited woman. That, you know, it's wonderful to think that you could get to that age and you would have all that good work behind you. But if you don't start today, you won't have it behind you. You know, by the time, you know.
Yeah. And she also a strong supporter of WikiLeaks, as you can see in a statement. And not only WikiLeaks, but all whistleblowers and fighting for truth and justice. So the person that introduced me to Edith was Felicity. She's the former director of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom from the UN office in New York. And she's focusing now on social movements resisting injustice. And with this shoot, we had a bit of a fun with the team Let Sleeping Dogs Lie. And a funny little detail about this is that afterwards we found out that the building behind her is actually Google UK's office. So we didn't know this. So that's, of course, makes this in a shot
Whose
more
office
interesting. Yeah.
Which office is it?
Google's UK office.
Oh,
yeah. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So she's now working on her PhD, focusing on social movements resisting injustice, and of course it's a big connection with WikiLeaks. Another Google connection is this shot of Jeremy Zimmerman, because it's shot in front of the door of a building that Google wanted to use as a campus in Berlin. And the neighborhood didn't want Google to take over their lives and spaces. And with public pressure, they succeeded to make Google cancel their plans for the campus. So they succeeded to kick Google out, actually.
Fantastic solidarity.
And Jeremy played a part in this protest. And
Jeremy is a wonderful person, you know, he's amazing.
If you're wondering if he's holding a real camera with film in it, I can show you that it was, because this was a shot he made of me.
Excellent. Right back at you.
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent.
Awesome.
I value diversity in all things, as well as basic freedoms such as the freedom to experiment, freedom to make mistakes, freedom to learn, and freedom to question everything, including myself and the structures of power and authority. I like to contribute to moments in time and space where these freedoms can be collectively practiced as ways to make new things emerge, along with the experience of new solidarities. I also value raw milk cheese and my life is music.
So he's diverse.
He loves Latin American music. He just loves, I can't remember what you say.
Colorful person. Yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant.
And NAOMI, whistleblower advocate and former director of the Courage Foundation.
Yeah.
And she was also active in the Occupy movement in 2011. And I think she's very conscientious in her work, and she has the ability to simplify complicated issues, as you can also see in her statement, where she says that it's actually very simple if you if you can help a person, there's a duty to do this. Then some members of the committee to defend Julian Assange. Yeah,
I know them.
Yeah, Clara, Joe, Wendy, Emmy. This was shot in front of Belmarsh.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
We had to do it quickly because there were already cards.
Oh, yeah, I can notice it now.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
You made it look really nice.
Yeah. Yeah, well, unfortunately, it's a really dark place there. So, yeah.
Oh, it's terrible.
Yeah.
Very dark place.
Yeah. So the Stella Morris, Julian's fiance, explained in an op-ed in El País last week how during the last 18-month period in the embassy, forces operated in a legal and ethical vacuum against them. And actually, what I remember from this meeting is that it was not only in the embassy, but also outside the embassy. They told me that they had to endure a lot of intimidation by police and embassy staff outside the embassy as well.
Yes.
So the last 2 years were really a horrible place to be.
Yeah, I've heard from I know all of these people, and they were there from the start.
Yeah.
And yes, I've heard some terrible stories about what had happened at various times outside. Yeah, it was ridiculous. Not to mention that the budget for policing, like by the Met Police outside the embassy, was something like 2 million a week or something. Ridiculous. Outrageous. Yeah, but they're lovely people, and they're just so solid and staunch to be there. We're going back nearly 10 years now, so yeah, they've been very solid.
Yeah.
And Wendy makes banners, so she would have made that one.
Yeah. Yeah, always the banners, of course, really help. It attracts so much attention. Yeah,
she's brilliant. Yeah. Oh, this is Emmy's statement.
Emmy's statement, yeah. So explaining a bit of her background and why she wants to defend.
Left Greece.
Yeah.
Parents left Greece because of the fascists there, and she campaigned with her mum as a child, putting up posters, things. So she's got a huge background in activism. She does an amazing amount of work, sort of in keeping the group together and administrative for the court proceedings, finding out what's happening, how many people could go, all those sort of things. Just endless amount of work. And also Emmy runs the Wise Up Action .info blog and newsletter for the Julian Assange Defence Committee, JADC. So if anyone would like to sign up to the JADC newsletter, I hope you don't mind me butting in there, but Emmy, who was on the right of the pic, does the newsletter, and so you can sign up at wiseupaction.info, and it's it'll let you know what everything, what's going on and how you can join campaigns, etc. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So Craig, this portrait is made last October, a day after a court hearing where Julian struggled to say his name and to remember his birthday and seemed frail and confused. So this was really a disturbing thing to witness. And when I met him the day after, he was still clearly affected by what happened in court the day before. You can really tell it by his look on his face. Yeah. And actually, he is now being persecuted himself because of reporting on another court case. So anyone in a position to donate to his defense fund can go to his website and make a donation there.
Definitely. He has raised some funds, but Craig Murray is a whistleblower. He was the UK ambassador to Uzbekistan, and he, in that role, had evidence passed before him of torture crimes committed by UK and allied forces, including, go and look at Craig's blog and follow it up, the story of a man being boiled alive. Now, if anyone saw, evidence of, intelligence and military forces boiling a man alive and didn't act on it, what kind of person would they be? And for reporting it through his system to his superiors, he lost his job. He has been continually attacked, and they have never let up on him for being a whistleblower about war crimes. And now he faces a contempt of court charge for reporting on the Alex Salmond trial. They were jumped up sexual allegations against the former Scottish independence leader, and where the evidence of 9 women was concocted to try to silence Alex, to put Alex Salmond away. But, thankfully a jury found him not guilty. Craig reported on the trial and received a contempt of court charge from that. They didn't allow him to sit in the last few days of the hearing. What his blogs said were less revealing than what newspapers splashed about the trial. Yet they are now pursuing Craig, and he could face up to 2 years in jail and an unlimited fines. The fines could be unlimited if they so choose to do. So yeah, a good point there to make, to look at Craig's blog, craigmurray.org, and on Twitter, and contribute to his defence fund if you can. Just follow his story. It's an amazing story. And he definitely, he is a person that, can really understand the persecution and torture that Julian's been facing for so long as well. That's a lovely portrait, and it does show that he's so moved by, it's like that feeling when you wake up after having a bad dream, isn't it? The next day, and you wonder whether it's real or not. Did that really happen to that person I know and love, and then you wake up and oh no, it's real, or or it's not real, Yeah, it's good. What's the back shot in there? That sky. Oh no, trees.
And this one, or the you mean the one of Craig, or
the backdrop? Did you? Yeah, the one of Craig.
This was actually shot in a very crowded area, so I found a tent where they stored some equipment, and we did it there.
That's really effective, though. Really effective in creating that mood. Yeah, that stark kind of emotion. Yeah, beautiful.
So this one of Joseph was also shot the day after this court hearing. Joseph is the WikiLeaks ambassador from the very beginning. And obviously the last 10 years have been very intense for everyone involved in WikiLeaks. And to me, this portrait is a reminder that WikiLeaks always maintained their integrity. And I mean, no further words needed, right? When you see this, it's also a very moving portrait.
Another day, just another day of torture and shitfuckery, if I can say that word. If you don't mind me saying that. But yes, he has been through a lot as well on the outside. Joseph.
Yeah.
Sure. Really.
Another one, part of the legal team involved from the beginning as well, Renata. She's a lawyer focusing on human rights in a digital age. A very current and important topic, with all the problems with digital surveillance related to COVID-19.
Okay.
Of course, yeah. So another one involved from the very beginning, the legal team.
Yeah, if you look at Renata Avrila up, the Guatemalan lawyer, she has some very good pieces on the Swedish allegations, and says that Julian's model for open source, not-for-profit information, truthful information, its main supporters were women. So women were prepared to put their hand in their pocket and, $20 a month, whatever, to contribute to this. And the CIA on the intelligence services obviously looked at the picture of, okay, who are the biggest supporters and how could we really turn them against Wikileaks? And so they targeted Julian in that way, and that sort of, with the smears. And the allegations that were nothing, the charges which never eventuated ever, were never made. So, you can't really even call them charges because there was never any charges filed. So, and in this way, perfectly targeted a person that Julian's market and Wikileaks market. And now that's one of our battles as well, as we try to regain that market. But if anyone is in any doubt, if they're talking to people who are in any doubt of their things, tell them to look up Renata Avrila and her blogs and posts and videos that she's made, because she perfectly lays out the plan to demonetize WikiLeaks.
Yep. Yeah. Another person who has experienced a lot with Julian, I think, Fidel, former Ecuadorian diplomat who served in the embassy for 6 of the 7 years that Julian lived there. And of course, he knows all about the smears and speculations and false reporting of what happened in the embassy, because he was actually there himself. And I think he has a lot of stories to tell, and maybe he will.
Definitely. Again, Fidel Narvaez, he has done a piece, it's called 40 Smears, about Julian Assange, debunked.
Yep.
And so look up Fidel if you want the 40, if anyone wants the 40 smears, debunked in, in short form, each one.
Yeah.
Fidel's a great guy, and he's always at, he's often attends the events, speaking events and things, part of the crowd. You can see him. Yeah. Lovely man.
Yeah, lovely man. If you can look at his statement, he points out that to make the world better for future generations, that we need to defend the heroes of our own generation. So to look to the future, we have to look to the past and to the present. So yeah, he's also focused on human rights a lot.
Yeah. And definitely knowledgeable about what's happened to the Ecuadorian the guy who was the Ecuadorian president when Julian was in the embassy before his citizenship was revoked and his asylum was revoked. Rafael Correa, who's now in exile in Belgium, and he's being persecuted by the new, the now president, Lenin Moreno, who took the IMF bribe for 4.3 billion and revoked Julian's asylum. But now Rafael Correa has charges against him, which could be 8 years imprisonment. Yeah, so it's ongoing torture by the regimes, you know, that are behind all of this. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Angela,
yeah, another good friend of WikiLeaks, theater director, activist, author. Her interest in WikiLeaks led to a play called Assassinate Assange. And she also staged Super Nerds, which is a transmedia project dealing with mass surveillance.
Mm-hmm.
And the text was based on conversations with digital dissidents and whistleblowers. So of course, there's a big connection with WikiLeaks as well there. Yeah.
Don't you love Art for Assange? Art, you know, in general, Art for Assange, the group as well is great. But
yeah.
I love the artistic expression that comes from people, because I always think that art is a way to, this is why I love your photojournalism project, because it's a way, it's a window to the soul, and it's a way to speak to people that doesn't sort of happen a lot in mainstream media. You know, you don't get that same evocative spirit and heart connection that you do from works of art. So I'm really all for the Artists for Assange movement. They've been, you know, great. I'd love to see that play. I haven't managed to see it, but if it ever gets redone, I will.
Yeah. Jacob, another person who was there from the beginning, computer security expert, journalist, artist, and activist. He also played a small role in the Assassinate Assange play. So
okay,
from Angela, so there's a connection with Angela.
Oh, he had a cameo.
yeah.
Oh, good.
And also the past 10 years for Jake have also been intense, not only because of his work as a WikiLeaks journalist. He also had to endure a coordinated and one-sided attack on his character and work.
Smears.
Yeah. And so in this portrait, he is actually, it was shot in Berlin.
Okay.
And he is facing the US Embassy in Berlin. Okay. You cannot see it because, and this might have intensified his look a bit.
Yes, no doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt. Incredible damage to his life that they tried to produce.
Yeah.
In smears, etc. And the same kind of tactics, basically, that they used with Julian in Sweden, we used on Jacob as well. And you can see their modus operandi, the CIA. We see right through you now, CIA, if you're listening.
Yeah. So his statement, we worked a bit on how we could reflect on how he has been cancelled. And I think this is a very good. Actually, on the website, if you hover above the text, you will even get more quotes or statements that he
I like that. Yeah,
was inspiring. Yeah, this is a bit of the artistic side of Jake. It's
brilliant.
There's also a very strong side of him.
Yeah, that's great. Oh,
so Stefania, another US embassy in the shot. She is standing in front of the US embassy in Rome.
Okay.
And which is actually a complete block of buildings in the middle of Rome, surrounded by surveillance cameras and guards. It's an amazing thing to see. It's just, they took over just a whole block in Rome with their buildings.
Oh.
So Stefania has done a tremendous job with her fight of the Freedom of Information Act case to access all the documents of Julian Assange.
Yes.
And she actually sued the US State Department for this. So this is, of course, quite a courageous thing to do. Yeah.
Very courageous. Yeah. And just, she does not give up. She is determined.
No. Yeah.
She's uncovered a lot of stones and things under those stones that weren't meant to be, uncovered. The UK CBS didn't want uncovered. So she's been amazing. She's an amazing person.
Yeah, true. And her statement is really a fine example of her work ethic, right? She will literally leave no stone unturned.
Yeah, and on journalism, leaving a job because they wouldn't allow her to cover the hearing.
Yeah.
Okay, bye-bye. I'm going to do it anyway. You know, money's not the thing.
Yeah,
it's the principle that counts. Yeah.
So amazing journalist, really. Yeah. Other Italian, Davide, Italian artist. He made Anything to Say. It's a sculpture of Chelsea Manning, Edward Snowden, and Julian standing on chairs. And the fourth chair is for the public. And it encourages the public to stand on it and speak out if you have something to say.
Yeah.
So I think.
Where's that situated, that sculpture?
It's it travels around, so it's not in one place. I think last year it was in Berlin, Brussels. So yeah, it travels around.
Maybe the sculpture can travel and we can't, maybe.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Keep traveling. Although they don't transport much anymore, do they?
No, exactly. That's also a problem, of course. Yeah. Yeah. And you talked about art before. I think he got it exactly right with his statement.
Art arrives where politics and justice fail, therefore changing our perception of the present. Yeah.
This is for me what art should do, and he clearly managed to do this with his work, with Anything to Say. I mean, it's really inspirational. And
Great.
if you he has a website, anythingtosay.com, if you want to look it up. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So this is Diani. She's standing in front of an hourglass sculpture. This sculpture is painted in the colors of the Wikileaks logo. It's in Berlin, and it was revealed on World Press Freedom Day in 2016.
Oh,
4 years ago. Yeah.
Wow.
Diana supports whistleblowers and organizes a lot behind the scene. She's also quite an excellent writer, as you can see in what she wrote for the website. She has a lot of knowledge about whistleblowers and truth telling, and also an amazing person in the support of Julian Assange.
Yeah. I'll just bottom with, if anyone wants to look up your website's name is validvalues.org, so they can read these statements later by checking the website.
This is Barbara, also a very moving portrait for me. Barbara is a human rights lawyer and one of the founding board of trustees of Courage Foundation.
Okay.
It's very moving because it seems that she's looking and longing beyond all the propaganda and lies in the media, looking and longing for the truth. And
focus is very strong, isn't it? There.
Yeah. So, and so a lot of truth topics in all the portraits, right? And justice.
Yeah,
and,
that's it. Courage.
And in her work as a human rights lawyer is greatly reflected in a statement, I think. Very precise statement on how she looks at her own work, I think. So the last one, NIELS Meltzer, the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture. He's done an incredible, valuable work in the Assange case in the last year. Amazing man. And in this portrait, he's looking at the current headquarters of the United Nations High Commissioner of Human Rights. He always wanted to be an astronaut.
Oh, really?
Observing the planet. Yeah, that was his big dream. And so observing was always a part of his DNA, I think. And now he's observing the planet for violations of human rights. And he's doing, I think, an amazing job with this. Yeah, not afraid of anything. He really tells it like it is.
No, he does.
And really not afraid to confront governments and keep pushing them. Yeah.
Well, he's sure of his work, and he's done amazing investigations in terms of, they're solid investigations. You don't doubt his word in any way because it's backed by the evidence of the other experts that he's brought in to draw the conclusions in the research that he's done. But yes, it's as you say on your website, the whole thing is this whole process against Julian's attack on the future. He seems to be looking there to the future, at the future of democracy and not just journalism, everything. And that's it's a very wide. That's why I regard this as the biggest issue. It's the biggest story in journalism of the century, and it's the at the top of all of the issues that need to be addressed because Julian's freedom is our freedom. So it's everyone in your essay, your photo essay there, seems to strongly have that at their heart, at their core motivation. They seem to understand it very well, and you can tell from your pictures that they, that's what they project.
Yep. Yeah, and so his NIELS' statement is also, I think, very important, and what a bit unites all these people. It's a really inspiration and a call to action to take the spotlight in your own hand and light the elephant in the room. And
don't waste a day.
Yeah. So, and create public pressure. I think it's really important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for bringing that presentation, Richard. I hope to see more shots, perhaps with when you can get out, when your restrictions are relaxed a little bit. Maybe you could set up a few shots and we could see if there's any difference in the kind of the mood or the attitude of the people that you shoot. It'd be interesting to see that as well.
Yeah.
So good luck with that. That was brilliant. Thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you for inviting me. Yeah.
No, you're welcome. It's lovely. Yeah. Thanks for your work as well, because I love art and Assange. So, and Alex is a brilliant. She's brought so much art to her work for the movement as well. That violin playing and all those beautiful songs, and it makes things just so much better. I think when you got artists around.
Yeah, agree. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hope to meet you one day. Hope we will catch up, at the trial or something, at the hearing, in November, supposedly.
I will definitely be there, so we can meet up there. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Richard.
You're welcome.
Okay. So if you want to check out Richard's website, it's Richard Lahus at validvalues.org. Richard's also on Twitter. And I hope he's inspired people to do their own kind of art project. I did mine. It's in the background here. It says enough torture. Like that. Hey, Alex. We've got...
Hello. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
I think I've pinned my wrong video. Oh, there we go. I was like, I can't unmute myself, but I was trying to unmute the wrong person because there's two of me. Sorry about that. That was wonderful. I felt really moved looking into the eyes of some of those people. I did have to go away and make it my tea and all that stuff because I've been going a bit.
Because you're on a marathon run. How long is this run for you now?
Well, unfortunately, there was a bit of a 2-hour sleep last night because of other things that had to be done, which was really frustrating. But there was nothing to be done about it. But so yeah, it's going to be hard to stay up till 7.
Oh my God. I feel for you. Oh.
Yeah, I'll be okay. I'll be fine.
Well, at least you don't have to go to court tomorrow.
I know, right? And I'm not in a cell, and I can go outside and stand in the rain, which was pelting down earlier, and it was getting a bit chilly in here. But if I turn the fire on, it's going to make loads of noise, so it's going to be cold. But anyway, I just wondered if we wanted to have any more chat now, or shall I've got the French footage, and I've got a 9-minute video from that Deepa has suggested from Andrew Feinstein and Consortium News.
Why don't you play that one? Because 9 minutes would nearly take us up to the two guests, Mohammed Al-Fazi and Tarek Haddad at 2.
Oh, is it 2 o'clock in England already?
Yes. It's fantastic. It's 13:49.
Do you know, does that mean I don't even have to be here?
Not, but I mean, I don't know. I do,
because I have to share. I have to share my video for you, haven't I? So I'll just have come in at the end after that video and unshare it for you and get you going. But do you need to get Tariq and everyone into the chat first?
Yes,
do you think they'll be in soon?
I think they probably will because they've only got
Yeah, I thought I had a little bit longer. I thought I had.
Oh, there's Tarek now. So
yay. Okay.
How about you do your video, and in the next 10 minutes, Mo will probably be here too.
Yeah. Okay. I'll do that.
Sense?
Tariq, really nice to meet you. I think you're following me on Twitter. So I don't know if you can. I can unmute you actually if you wanted to talk. Anyway, good to see you, Tariq.
Hi there.
Well, I'll just play a video that I wanted to hang on. I have to share a screen on a different one because otherwise it goes infinitely. And, oh goodness!
I wonder how much
Joe Rogan.
He stands.
Sorry about that. It just goes autoplay, and I can't ever get around the back to do it. All right. So I have to find the link because, unfortunately, you're going to have to bear with me. I'm going to stay muted on that computer. I have to do some channel surfing, unfortunately. Is everyone seeing a shared screen? Oh, no one's muted. There we go. Oh, it's a little bit longer. It gives people a little bit longer to settle in.
Alex est là. Ok, super. Je vais la présenter rapidement alors. Oui, c'est bon? Voilà. Alors Alexis, c'est une militante néo-zélandaise. Elle est de Wellington. Très active en soutien à Julian. Elle est responsable des groupes Facebook Green River Arch et également de Kennels for Assange en Nouvelle-Zélande. Elle s'est également très investie lors de la Virtual March for Julian le 11 avril dernier pour commémorer les 1 an d'emprisonnement de Julian à Belmarsh. So Alex is a New Zealand activist from Wellington. She is responsible for Facebook support for Julian Green River Arch, and also member of Kennels for Assange. She also participates in a virtual march for Assange on Saturday, 11th of April, and to commemorate Julian's 1 year in prison in Belmarsh. So it's all yours, Alex.
Hi, Alex. Hello. Hello. Thank you for having me. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Very clear.
Well, I'm a pretty angry tri-national citizen here. I'm ashamed to be British. The courts, government, Queen are making a mockery of themselves, except for it isn't funny. This is our kids' free press disappearing before our eyes. It took thousands of years, literally thousands of years, and rise and fall of several civilizations to gain the right to free speech. And our rogue governments have unraveled that in the space of 1 year. Britain, the home of the Magna Carta, now just an obedient poodle, Trump's bitch. What on earth could the Queen be thinking? Royal disgrace from Epstein trafficking. Yet she stays silent, no pardon, even while her government conspires to murder Julian Assange, the people's hero, as we speak. I'm embarrassed to be Australian bred, a country that produced the greatest journalist of our time and then hung him out to dry and stuck their heads back in the sand. They're leaving his beautiful family to be persecuted. In New Zealand, where I raise my own little Kiwis, the silence and complicity of the media is mind-boggling on this issue. Wellington invited the world to Julian's birthday. 62 cities got on board for Candles for Assange last year, but they ignored our feel-good story here in New Zealand. Worse, Radio New Zealand news desk asked me to spell Assange. Nikki Hager, New Zealand's top investigative journalist, helped bring us a supporting statement signed by 1,500 journalists. Hedges, Pilger, Chomsky, Ellsberg, but not a single network here gave it a mention. New Zealand's government received our petition for Julian's asylum. All we asked was that they discuss it as an idea in Parliament, but they answered, no jurisdiction. Like cowards with tails between their legs. I have 3 passports. I should be lucky, but they are making me feel like burning 2 of them right now. I'm not American, but I might as well be. We're all vassal states. We're all complicit in the same wars, so they can't keep their broken system unless they can criminalize journalism. And we cannot let that happen. I suspect here I'm talking mostly to activists in this particular algorithm bubble. But I direct this not to those brave individuals around the world, whether they be in Candles for Assange or any other group that we list doing protests, but the rest of you who stay silent. That's who I want to talk to. In the face of all the evidence, we cannot leave this mess for our kids to sort out. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. That was a song played by Alex Taylor outside the embassy in London. And he was taken off the streets by the armed task force. So I wanted to play Waltzing Matilda again today in lieu of Alex Taylor, who was pulled off the street and his violin confiscated. So thank you for having me so much from Candles for Assange. I so appreciate what you guys do. You've been an absolute godsend, really, going to Belmarsh. So thank you. Thank you.
Thanks to you. Thank you, Alex. Thanks a lot for your music too.
And see you in the front of the prison. As usual now, it's a rendezvous.
I'll try. It's a long way to come from New Zealand.
Thank you so much. And take care.
No problem.
Thank you, Alex. Bye. Have a nice day.
Tu veux traduire, Sophie?
No, it's okay.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you so much for inviting me. To speak up for Julian is our duty, and it's our great love to him. A good man is a journalist. A good man.
That was great.
Oh, sorry about that. It's hard. I think the host muted me. So I'm sorry, I didn't play the whole video because that was meant to be the Andrew Feinstein link, and it was the bit of the French one. And I've got there's about 3 or 4 speakers that I managed to group together, just the English bits for this stream, and I just put it out today. So I'll play the rest of it later. I thought you guys could get going if you want, because we're actually on form for 1 minute to go until official start, hey, for you guys. And otherwise, I don't mind carrying on playing it.
No, that's fine. We're just waiting for Mo, but we could possibly start. Hopefully he'll be here any second.
You'd
just
like them to talk together, so I'm happy to put another, I can put another segment on. It's just that I got some kind of error message come up on my screen. I didn't want it to play much longer like that.
Well, actually, I don't know if you should do that because he's having trouble coming in, and he has to leave 10 minutes early as well.
Well, let's get ready for him then. So RSFO, if you can help, I'm not sure right now. Maybe you guys could chat. It's easy for you guys to chat because I screw up the screen every time I do it. Right, so what we just saw there was just my bit, actually, I'm sorry, of the French event, which was on the 18th of April, and it's called Shout Out for Julian, and what they were doing was encouraging, freedom of speech when it comes to defending Julian Assange. And there were some really, really wonderful talks there, and not only that, but one amazing handling of 2 languages, which I haven't actually seen before, and yeah, it was great to see them do it so well.
Mo's in the waiting room, by the way, Alex.
He's in the waiting room. I don't know where RSFSO is gone, so I'm going to have to. I've never accepted anyone before, so that's weird. If anyone could message RSFO, I'll try. I don't think he's answering.
I am here.
Oh, you are here, sorry. I'm having trouble letting in participants. I can't access my chat without ruining the stream all the time, so I'm trying to avoid it.
I think I have to send them a direct link to Zoom.
Yeah, because I just tried to get in on my phone and I couldn't, so I don't know what's going on.
But where can I contact them?
He said he's on the mail. He's in the waiting room.
He's in the waiting room, but he can't be let in because I can't let him in.
But
sorry, everybody.
If someone is in the waiting room, I can see there's
okay.
It's highlighted in.
He says he's waiting for the host to start the webinar.
Is he in Deepa's one in England?
Maybe I'll give him the link again.
Did he get the correct link?
I'll send him the link again.
I've just sent him a link.
Oh, good on you.
Hopefully it'll work, because I just tried to use it on my phone and it wasn't happening, and it can be that they change. So we might have to form a new one, RSFO, if that's okay, or I don't know. Hello, good to see you.
Hello.
I've not seen you before, but I think we've talked a lot online.
Yeah.
In Discord or somewhere, yeah.
On Unity for Day.
Yeah, yeah.
Something.
That's great.
I thought you were going to have dark brown hair, and then you turned blonde.
It's strange, isn't it? You hear people's voices, you think something. Yeah, cool. So yeah, can anyone send a link to Mo? Because if we're time sensitive, then
Tarek did, and I did.
Right. great. Actually, I guess I didn't really finish speaking about the rogue speeches that you and I were talking about before, because I got cut off because we were on to the next thing. The timing's so important here. But the thing I was quite proud of is the way Christian Heffernan was so actually cutting to the British High Commissioner in his retweet. It was it felt like a real sting at them, and it felt like it annoyed them. And so I'm really hoping that had an effect. And we've got Mo, so I've done enough infill.
Awesome.
Yay. Okay, so I'll let you do all the introductions, Alison. You've done a sterling job. The photos were absolutely amazing, and your descriptions as well, and it was beautiful to see that art. So thank you. It was moving.
Cheers. You're
okay,
wonderful.
I'm going to go and have another tea.
Okay, go for it. Hello, Tarek and Mohammed. Mo, how are you going? Thank you for joining us today. I was a journalist, okay? So I want to talk to you two journalists in the way that I admire you so much for, your stand. I was a bit of a silly little journalist, but I had a little 3-year-old child, so I had to do, my job. So what I did was take a big swerve inside that evil Murdoch corporation, and I said, I'm going to go sideways, and I'm going to find a little niche in arts and sub-editing and production editing. So that's what I did for 20 years. And while my son grew up, and as soon as he grew up, he was taller than me, I said, that's it. I'll take the redundancy, Mr. Murdoch. I put my hand up. There was a meeting of a newsroom floor. It was the worst newspaper in Australia, the one that I worked for. Okay. Meeting on the newsroom floor. We're going to start the redundancies. Get rid of sub-editors. We can't make money out of online journalism. This is 2008. But first we'll do voluntary redundancies. So this was just the HR lady telling everyone on the shop floor. And I went, oh, pick me. Can I have one? I literally did that. Everyone turned around and went, what the? And she said, Alison, if you're really serious, come and see me later. But, ha, ha, ha. And so I did. Of course, I did then put it in, and I took the redundancy, and then I was off. And I sort of didn't want to return because, yeah, you probably get me. But Tarek, you grew up from the age of 9 on Jersey Island, right? And you we know that's a financial tax haven, Jersey Island. When you worked in the financial industry there. You went on to study at Binghamton University School of Management in upstate New York, and you were inspired to become a journalist when you realised that place that you'd grown up in, that offshore tax haven, Jersey Island, had hidden trillions of dollars from royal families, corporations, and politicians. So you thought, oh, I'm going to, do something about this, be a journalist, trained with the Press Association. And your first job was with the respected regional daily, the Hull Daily Mail. Who would have known that was, that was high? I've heard people speak ill of Hull, but apparently the newspaper is great. And then the International Business Times, and then you're hit by retrenchment when the Google algorithm hit its profitability, and you decided to become a novelist. That's a very interesting part of your career. In Europe, you just went, oh, I'm a novelist now. And then you returned to journalism with a bang. Amazing job, Newsweek, yeah? Where you were a well-respected reporter, but you resigned in disgust when your piece on the revelations from the doctored OPCW report on alleged chemical weapons used by the Syrian government was rejected for publication. That was December 2019, and then you launched your own independent public news and wire and video service called The Watchdog. Am I correct in all of those facts?
Absolutely, and you've done a much better introduction than I could have done for myself. Thank you very much.
I'm probably going to fall down now. And Mo, hi, how are you going? I regularly seen and speaking to you around the courts where you report, so does Tarek on the Julian Assange extradition hearing. You received a Bachelor of Laws from London University's School of Oriental and African Studies, and you did your Master's in International and Comparative Law at the American University in Cairo. You worked in human rights law for a number of years before shifting to journalism, and you work for Sputnik News now and also report for the Real News Network, you contribute to Open Democracy, The Canary, and find him on the Grey Zone with amazing reports. You've teamed up with Max Blumenthal on a few, and I've loved those stories. So what really interests me about both of you, is that right? Could you correct me there? Can you be my sub-editor there, Mohammed?
Yes, no, that's correct. So,
correct,
that's
okay.
correct.
All good. We have agreement on those things. But what interests me about both of your careers is that, your principal stands in journalism, not often seen. I've dobbed myself in saying that I was a little, sideways girl, but it impresses me. I'd like to hear a little bit from Tarek about Newsweek, what happened there and why and how you felt about it.
Sure. As I think I've talked about a few times, I think what happens with all of these corporations is that it's never a tacit, you can't talk about certain issues. It becomes kind of, it's kind of an unspoken sort of code in the newsroom that just certain things become taboo to discuss. So, as you mentioned, I was working in journalism for a while, and then I decided that I had to step away just because I was feeling very frustrated at how untruthful it was becoming. And I thought, if I want to write, if I want to make any sort of impact or significance, I'm going to have to do it where, I'm not bound by corporations or so on. So I kind of had this very quixotic journey into Europe where I decided to write. But after a while, I kind of, like everyone else, I have to grow up, I have to earn money, I have to kind of, get a career. So that's when I came back to journalism. But yeah, so I think when I came into that environment after having been away from it for a while, it did me good to be away because, I was more in touch of what's actually happening in the real world. Whereas I think in newsrooms, they have, I think, a kind of different picture of what's really happening than what's actually represented out there. And it's kind of speaks to the industry because, who do most kind of mainstream journalists speak to for their sources now? It's people that are in think tanks or PR people from companies. So they're not really ever kind of relying or getting their news, from genuine sources that know what's going on or that don't have some sort of interest in portraying stories in a certain way. So kind of I've been outspoken about Syria for a long time. It's kind of one of the main things that I've kind of focused my attention on. And I think having stepped away, when I came back, I kind of clashed with this system where I've been in that position where I felt frustrated, but this time around, I just thought, this story is too important to kind of continue lying about. We've been doing it for 10 years as a mainstream media. I mean, I remember when the civil war in Syria started, and I knew immediately that this was a fabrication and, a gross injustice. And, you try and chip away at that lie every time that you can. But at the end of there comes a point when you say, no, I have to say it exactly as it is, not just kind of in the veiled language of, rebels from so-and-so, have to be really truthful about what's going on in the situation, because I think some of the things that come out of Syria in the last few weeks especially are really kind of horrifying when you consider them.
Yeah, definitely. Mo, can you identify with that in any way? Was your career in journalism, what did you think of the newsroom culture? I mean, I often think that, when I was in my early days, there was kind of like a bit of a vibrancy still then, so 2008, I left, so 20 years reverse. There was still sort of a vibrancy about, a story would come in, we'd know, it was amazing, gobsmacking. People would follow it all the way through as a group, as a sort of. Now it seems to be, I think it's changed. It's sort of, I noticed editors that were coming in and doing hatchet jobs on people, for no reason. And we actually knew that that it was a hatchet job and it was untrue. And one of the editors, a big editor in Australia, did a sort of a tour to Ireland to track down someone who told him that they saw Manning Clark, who's an Australian historian, wearing a Lenin medal. So he went to Ireland to try to, find some basis to this. He didn't find any basis to us, but he still wrote the story. Okay, he became the editor of the Australian, which is the national daily, Murdoch Daily, and you know, he came to our paper, and then he's still a consultant editor. Did you find any of those kind of things, Mo, when you were working after you finished your degrees?
Not to the degree that you've just described. Also, I've been in news, so we're going into the fourth year now. So it's and all this time I've been working with alternative sites, so I've had a different experience, and in every case it's always been remotely. So first as a researcher with the Real News, they're based in Baltimore. So I pitched sort of UK stories, and some EU stories was supposed to be sort of my mandate. And then also with the Canary or with Sputnik, I've never been in a traditional newsroom. So I have, which has got both, I suppose, advantages and disadvantages. But I haven't, you know, I haven't experienced a kind of traditional newsroom in that sense.
Yeah.
If I could just add to that quickly, actually, because it's something I noticed is that, you know, the last time I feel like I did real journalism was when I was kind of working at a local newspaper. You know, where you're actually kind of interviewing the politicians, or you're going to court, or you're doing those kind of things. You know, it seems like kind of most mainstream publications, especially now with the economy of it, the newsroom is, people don't leave the office. They're just in their kind of towers in London or wherever, and they're writing about places they've sometimes never been to. You know, so I remember some of the foreign affairs journalists at Newsweek, you know, kind of grew up, or, you know, been in the UK all their life. They've not been to the places that they're writing about, and they're just, you know, they don't have that first-hand experience. They're not actually on the ground. They're just relying on people that don't really, you know, or they have an agenda to tell you what's going on. And I think, you know, part of the kind of problem that we're in is that economic side of journalism, where you know, you could afford to have people in different places that are actually, you know, they're reporting facts.
You could afford to have photographers and journalists, but what are journalists now? Photographers and journalists, and they're online editors. I mean, when I left, you had to, you know, part of my job as a sub-editor was putting copy online and, you know, doing stuff like that. But the journalists didn't have to do it themselves. Now I've seen incredible schedules where they're tweeting, they're putting stories up online, they're changing it, you know, in each edition. There's actually no one behind the desk at our big giant Dalek computers with the proprietary software, where we were working, changing, making, you know, like making it all sing and, you know, doing that sort of background work for them. Now there are photographers doing a whole lot of things. And as you say, Tarek, you know, 4 stories a day, can't leave the office really, can you? You're just doing, you know,
I mean,
and
at some certain points in my career, for International Business Times, for example, I was expected to do 8 stories a day with all the pictures, all the links, all the so-and-so, you know, it's absolutely insane. Like, you know, it's like clockwork. It's like 1 an hour with everything. And you're just essentially there to get as many clicks as you can get in that 1 hour. And that's, you know, a good job, a good job well done is, you know, how many clicks have you got this day, you know? And I think too many journalists will kind of sympathize with that struggle of, that's what your role has been reduced to. I remember kind of that feeling of, you know, I'd spent, you know, my own time 3 or 4 hours or something reading some government document or researching about Syria, and, you know, presenting it with like eagerness to my editors, you know, this is a really important story. And then it's, yeah, but there's this video on Twitter of some cat doing something stupid. Can you write about this? Or, you know, some seal has, you know, grabbed a kid off the pier or something, you know, and you're thinking,
Golden Retriever finds love again. Yeah.
Exactly.
We have a running series at Sputnik of Golden Retriever stories, and
really,
when I look at the analytics, it is one of the most widely viewed stories. I was like, well, yeah, sure, because that's also, it's not, you know, human beings, if you don't want to be stressed out and you don't be anxious, and things are serious, you know, serious things like surveillance and assassination and what have you, will get a certain number of readers, but something which does not trigger anxiety and is just sort of like a fluff piece will get far more. And for whatever, I keep seeing the Golden Retriever, it's like clockwork. There's probably, I don't know if there's one person that keeps doing that story,
You're doing it. You've got a golden retriever, right?
No.
Yeah, well, in some ways, the model, when the internet happened, the model for journalism broke, didn't it? Because, I mean, I know that Murdoch could never really make any money out of online journalism. And I mean, let's face it, you know, it's pretty hard to subscribe to those rags. So what basically happened was that he just went on a monopolistic spree, just buying up all of, you know, in Australia, buying up all the regional papers and, you know, the weekly papers, even the community newspapers that did have your court stories, did have your, you know, they still might do them, but, you know, they don't do anything very well. And syndicate it all, cut down the price, get rid of the sub-editors, you know, pump everything out. Hopefully, you know, we make money in the end. Doesn't seem to be working still. And that was the cry from when I left, you know, that we can't make money out of, you know, online journalism. So we're going to get rid of all the sub-editors, you know. And it was just getting rid of, first it was the typesetters and the Wapping disputes in London, you know, when they went to offset printing. So all the printers and typesetters, and then you know, then the sub-editors go, and then photographers, you're just a photojournalist now doing everything. So it's a broken model, I think. Do you think?
Well, it's the model is a reflection of the wider economic reality, as has been said. So it's they feed into each other. So the more desperate financially an organization is, the less they can allow, or the less they can invest, or the less they're willing to invest in investigative work that, you know, ideally, for example, I would like to be able to disappear for a few days, reading certain documents, maybe go speak to people, what have you. I still have certain pieces which are investigative pieces, which are just because of the structure of what Tarek described, of being expected to do a certain number of pieces, et cetera, a day. It's been now a couple of months and I haven't been able to address them. And basically, if I'm going to address them, it's going to have to be during the weekend. It's going to have to be doing my own time. And I'll probably pitch them to like an alternative outlet, because I don't think they've got the capacity at even where my main publisher now. I don't think they've got the capacity to be dealing with, you know, more in-depth investigative pieces, which is really, it's frustrating, because that's the kind of thing that I find interesting to begin with. You know, nowadays I'm having to argue to be able to go to court, even to like cover the last Assange hearing. I had to argue very strongly to go, and even though I've been to every single hearing, extradition hearing, that is, every single extradition hearing in his case, and in the end, when I was there, it was just me and 2 other journalists that were physically there. And it makes a difference having somebody there, you know. So. Well,
you raise the subject of Julian, which of course we're talking about, but it's also the theme of journalism without fear or favour, and that's, you know, a pillar of journalism. And you know, what we've been talking about relates back to why aren't journalists talking about it? And these go to those comments go to some of the issues behind it. But in terms of the court case, I wasn't here when Julian's Swedish extradition was going on, hearing was going on, but apparently it was live streamed to 14,000 people through Sky. And now, as you know, as you both know, at the last, with the last case management where the audio was very bad, and some clerk of the court had to repeat Julian's defense lawyer, Edward Fitzgerald's, what he was saying down the phone line, you know, verbatim. That was up to a clerk.
And it wasn't even verbatim, unfortunately.
Oh, wasn't it?
He tried his best, but like, you know, have you ever played the game Telephone? Or I don't know if you call it Chinese whispers in this country.
Yes.
When, you know, in school you sit around, right, to teach you about the reality of gossip, right, and what you say, and when it comes back to you, how much has changed. And, you know, even when we were in court and you're hearing kind of through the muffled voice of Edward Fitzgerald QC, the main defense lawyer for Assange, his voice is coming via a crackly speaker to my right above me in the courtroom. And then the clerk is repeating into the speaker where the press are, into the microphone of the speaker where the press are, what he's hearing. It was one of the articles I wrote on it. I interviewed one of the journalists who was on the call, right, who wasn't physically present, who also works with the Don't Extradite Assange campaign, the official Wikileaks campaign. And he described it as a farcical experience of, because it didn't start off with that. First, it started off with press complaining on the phone that they couldn't hear and being told to shush, which I understand because you're not allowed to just start speaking in court. But I can imagine all these press sitting there just listening on the audio link, but like, I don't understand what's going on. And so then the judge is like, okay, well, we'll see what we can do. And then instructed the clerk to just repeat. So first she said Edward Fitzgerald had to start again from the beginning because he'd already spoken for about like 5 minutes. So she's like, 5-10 minutes. And so she's like, can you start again from the beginning, you know, summarize, and then that's literally what happened. The hearing probably doubled in time because of that. So it was, yeah, people should read about it.
No court transcript?
Well, okay, so here's the thing about court transcripts in this country. They're expensive, right? It's farmed out, it's outsourced. You're not allowed to record in court. That's illegal. That's contempt of court. So you can take notes. There aren't stenographers anymore who are typing away. In the higher courts, in the Crown Court, where you have jury trials, you do have recordings, but you're not able to just access that. The audio is sent to a private company, and then you go and pay that private company per hour. It can be, you know, around 230, 330 pounds sterling per hour, right? Until very recently, magistrates' court hearings were never recorded until like February this year. So until like literally a month or 2 months ago. So that's just started out to be trialed. But once again, you have to be prepared to spend a few £100s to get a transcript of it. It's not like you will be sent the audio and you can transcribe yourself. You have to pay a for-profit company which gets the audio. So it's which I find quite cheeky because
I find it surprising.
That was a problem. When I used to work in law, I was in smaller firms, so we always represented the smaller party in a litigation case. And you know, there was a lot of pressure on me to take very good notes because we were told, like, you know, we can't afford to be billing the client like, you know, a few £100s per hour to just make sure you get exactly what the judge says is exactly what the you know, the various parties said. And that was a lot of pressure on me. I also have a disability in my hands. I can't, and unlike Tarek, I can't do shorthand. I wish they taught that in law school, actually, when I seen Tarek do that. So it's and whereas the other side, where it's the government, say, because we used to deal with cases dealing with the Home Office or what have you, or it's like a wealthy company, of course they'll pay, because for them it's actually relatively little cost if you're a multi-million-pound company or if you're the government to just pay for a transcript of the hearing. Whereas if you're, you know, representing people who don't have much money, yeah, I don't know any time when I was working in law where we actually got the transcript, where we actually paid for it, just because clients, you know, you were just expected to take really good notes. So it's now on the other side, as a journalist, I also see the pain. I also experience the pain as well. But you know,
isn't that incredible? Before I came to London to do Julian's hearing as an activist, I was working for the biggest environmental campaign in Australia to stop this huge coal mine, and some of our activists were in a magistrate's court hearing because they did a lock-on, and they got the world record for locking on to stop a coal port loading up, you know, trains loading up. And so they were fined $8,000 each, which is about four grand pounds. And everything's recorded. It was $300 to get the court transcript. You know, every single case is recorded. I mean, it seems strange that they don't do it here because, you know, what if something weird happens? And in this case, something weird did happen, which was a member of parliament turned up in court, and that was sort of, you know, that's not done. You know, there is a separation of, you know, the judiciary and supposed to be. So, you know, at least that gets recorded and held in public record. But you just have I suppose they just record the judgment. What do you think about this, Tarek? This whole issue of bad audio and transcripts?
I mean, I think, yeah, it's a bit difficult because obviously we're in this very
we don't want to be contempt
global situation. I think it's, you know, not the case all, you know, across the board. You know, I think if everything had been you know, normal, I think, you know, the access to journalists is relatively decent. I don't think it's anyone trying, you know, maliciously to kind of hamper. It's just, you know, yeah, we are in this situation, and I guess the courts are a place where they're very antiquated, and especially in the UK, you know, it's you know, they have their procedures and everything is still kind of, they have their formalities and so on. And so I think, yeah, it's just one of those places where it's kind of lagging behind in the technology. It's not going to be like, you know, a startup firm that's kind of reacting to this, you know, this global situation where we're all kind of in lockdown. You know, that the courts are going to be a little bit slow in taking these measures, especially when, you know, traditionally recording in courts is prohibited, and it's down to the journalists to kind of take accurate shorthand from the proceedings.
So not a conspiracy.
Yeah, I mean,
to give bad audio to that.
Conspiracy of deliberately underfunding the court system here as well. I mean, this is one of the richest countries on the face of the planet. It has one of the oldest standing legal systems in human history. It is like, it's one of the most technologically advanced countries on the planet. And it's just amazing the extent to which things are just not up to scratch, or even have been undermined over the last 10 years of austerity. I mean, one of the reasons I found it so difficult to qualify as a fully fledged lawyer with a training contract is because every place I went to, didn't matter if they'd been around for like 100 years, started to go bust because they were dependent on legal aid, and legal aid was just being slashed. Magistrates' courts, the number of which they closed down is massive across the country. They kept saying, well, you only hear 50% of your day is taken up with cases, so we can just close you down. Well, what that means is defendants and family members and all the rest of it have to travel twice as long, and other magistrates' courts end up becoming completely overburdened with the number of cases they have. And that happens, you know, throughout the country. I mean, that's been going on since 2000, since the Tories first took power in coalition government with the Liberal Democrats. So it's not that the teleconferencing system was deliberately sabotaged so that the Assange hearing can't go well. If anything, it made it more of a farce, right? It's more that there has been just chronic underinvestment in public services in this country for years. There's a combination, I would say, of the era of neoliberalism on the one hand, outsourcing all manner of things, and then combined with austerity on the other hand, which is, I mean, technically austerity is bringing an end to luxury. So whether or not we think functioning public services are a luxury or not is another matter. But I mean, the word austerity, I mean, obviously not in practice.
Yes.
So,
yes.
I think that kind of touches on a very important point, is that this, you know, this case with Assange seems to be symbolic of kind of everything happening at once. You know, it's, you know, and this defunding of public services is kind of counterbalanced, I guess you could say, with vast amounts of money spent on military spending, on, you know, Western intelligence agencies, you know, all the, it's, you know, our money's going to the wrong places, and someone who tries to speak out about these issues is the one that's kind of, he's the one kind of facing the burden of you know, the system first. And that's, I think, you know, why so many people today are, you know, kind of recognizing that we're at a very, you know, critical point where more and more people, thankfully, are starting to speak up for Julian, which they haven't done, because I think now it's really becoming noticeable that we need truth in journalism, truth in our societies, I think.
So what do you both think, you know, you can just jump in when you can, of the temperature of this story in mainstream media is now the temperature of the journalists? Are they hot to it, cold to it? You know, are they getting warmer? Do they realize that they are alive and in a mainstream media role, and they could report on the biggest story of the century? They could, like, you could be, if I was a young gung-ho reporter, you know, that's where I'd be, you know, doing this story, because it's the most important story, you know, as you say, all of the issues can, you know, converge in this one. What do you think the mood is?
I think, I mean, it seems to be that it's improving. I think, I mean, there's more and more international pressure, I think, and, you know, at the recent hearings we had, you know, plenty of, you know, good journalists from Germany, for example, and we had monitors coming from Germany, you know, and from organizations like RSF that were there. So, and I think, you know, you're starting to get that sense of unity among journalists. I think, you know, because we were all there. I remember the first day that there was probably about 100 people waiting to get into the hearings. And it was, you know, we kind of felt this disorganization and this kind of, you know, but it was about 100 journalists that were there that was kind of arguing with the ushers, even though they were doing the best that they can. But it was kind of, I think, you know, you're starting to see kind of pressure. And I think even though there's plenty of journalists there that probably, you know, because I spoke to them, you know, some people from, you know, massive organizations, Wall Street Journal, Reuters, AP, they were all there. And with some of them, you do get a sense that they don't understand that the significance of this, or they're still locked into that narrative that he's this kind of whatever figure that's been portrayed in the media. But you know, I think there's plenty of other people there. We had some mention of Stefania Maritzi before. You know, she was there, and you know, so there's plenty of journalists there that do support him. And I think as we're interacting in the sort of moments between court, you know, during coffees or a cigarette or whatever, I think the understanding of what Julian represents is growing. So that's good to hear. But I think the pressure on the outside, you know, is going to be just as important as what's happening inside the courtroom. It has to be journalists everywhere.
What's your take, Mo?
I think it's a mixed bag. It's true that lots of people came to the first February hearing, but it's also true that they started to thin out as the case started to be more focused from the defense perspective than the prosecution perspective. So the first days when you had the largest number of journalists, where you know, it was quite difficult and you had to wait in a queue if you weren't already registered in advance, hoping that a slot would become free for you. Whereas after a day or two, you were pretty much guaranteed, if you were there, that you'd get a space to sit down in, because it was more like the opening. And unfortunately, the opening was dominated by the prosecution, right? So yeah, you see far more. But you know, there are agency reporters like for Reuters and AP or the PA, the Press Association, and so you do see it get picked up. I mean, there's still I still see things sometimes like reference to rape charges still, even though he's never been charged. There were no charges in Sweden. There's a preliminary investigation. But I think the fact that the Sweden side of things seem to have dissolved or gone away, yeah, has made it easier, because the Sweden aspect of things is what seemed to really change things for Assange, especially in Britain, possibly in the United States as well, I don't know, but especially in the UK in terms of attitudes. Yes. It had, the way it was used, I think it had the desired effect. Yeah. But the fact that it's got, you know, the fact that we've seen more establishment outlets and editors and former editors come out and sign letters saying, you know, fine, they have their own provisos. Okay, I don't necessarily like Assange, blah, blah, blah. You know, I mean, I've seen some which were kind of disappointing, because it's like the first paragraph was basically, you know, criticisms of Assange, which I'm not sure that's like necessary to go into that detail, the level to which you disagree with somebody before. I mean, I saw less opposition to Saddam Hussein when people were coming out against the invasion, you know, and that guy actually engaged in illegal invasion of Iran and gassed Kurds. But if you wanted to oppose the invasion of Iraq, you didn't, you know, if you want to do it properly, you didn't start for like a 10-minute thing about how Saddam Hussein was an evil guy, because it sort of defeated the purpose, because the invasion wasn't about him. It's about an entire country.
Yeah, it's kind of like a script, isn't it? Where, like a reality TV show, you know, you think, you know, they've got these characters that they're their own people, but their script has been written for them, and the show is the same every series, you know, right down the line. Same evil characters, same, you know, plots, blah, blah, blah. So they write a script, and it's almost as if the journalists have got a drawer. And in that drawer, you know, they have, you know, some phraseology, which is bad and unfair, and they feel like they must throw that in every time. And I do know that you go to history of stories and, you know, you'll extract, not you guys, but, you know, that's it, you know, as a journalist, you'll look at who's written the stories beforehand in the files, and some of the phraseology will get repeated, but it seems to be that sort of like a collective guilt thing. There's sort of like we better put something bad in, because, you know, that's what we always do. You know?
Yeah, but you said it right. You feel you have to, and as a, you know, each journalist is making a decision based on, first of all, there's what they believe and what they think, right? This is what they will generally believe and think. And most people are not experts on like Assange case, even if they write about it. Doesn't mean that they've actually spent the time to like pour in for what also takes hours if you want to look at certain things. I deliberately avoided dealing anything on the Swedish matter for like in 2018, just because I knew that if I wanted to do it, I wanted to do it properly, and that would require quite a lot of reading, and I didn't want to be unfair to any party. So I deliberately avoided anything that wasn't other than just referencing a preliminary investigation. And you know, and as I start to learn more about it, like actual facts, then I'd report on it. So there's what the journalist believes, but then there's also what you think you can get by your editor. And then there, because I still have that, right? You know, going into too much detail, right? I've got that Sputnik, like, you know, what is it like? I don't want aggravation for myself on an article, right? So, and if I've come into clashing with my editors too many times, then I've like worn down my my credit, if you like. So then I have to make a judgment call for each piece. Is it worth it having this line in here, which I do want to have in there, but I think may instigate some like never-ending discussion or argument that I'm not interested in having. It'll just mean my piece takes hours to go out late, etc. And then I get flagged up for being difficult, right? Because I get that a lot, right? So there's you, your own views, there's your editor, and whatever pressure the editor themselves is on from the publisher or whatever. And then there's your impression of the readership as well. What do I need to say? You know, and I see people who I greatly respect, and I'll see their articles when they publish an opinion piece, say in the New York Times, versus an opinion piece in the Canary or wherever. You see the differences because you're catering to a particular readership. So you think about what you'll put in there and what you'll take out. So it is its own like art versus and science as well. So it's there's all kinds of things that go into the sausage making process.
Yeah, it's a conundrum because what comes first? It's kind of like, I remember there's a famous sort of anecdote about Murdoch. Someone saw, reporters were seeing Barbara Streisand CDs on his desk. So there were a lot of Barbara Streisand stories being written. It was probably around the Hillary, you know, like the Clinton Foundation days and meetings and, you know, dinners and you know, and liaisons. But yeah, they just thought, oh, Rupert Murdoch must like Barbara Streisand, so we'll start writing about Barbara Streisand. Barbara Streisand.
Yeah, I think we touched on a very kind of important point there with language and, you know, how certain things get repeated over and over again. And I think that's kind of, you know, where I've always tried to focus my attention, but I think is kind of what people need to be kind of doing at a wider level of, you know, when something is said or reported from a certain government, or, you know, you get, because I think, you know, I think I've heard this repeated before, that, you know, these charges against Assange were made, and lots of good journalists kind of got swept in by that, because you see something that comes from an official source, you know, and many of us will not be kind of experts in the Swedish legal system, or we weren't there, we can't really fact check it, but it comes from, you know, a government that we think is, you know, a democratic country, it's European, you know, you're kind of naturally inclined to believe it. But it's again, it gets back to the very fundamentals of journalism of, doesn't matter where that information is coming from, it's kind of your duty to fact check it before you publish it. So I think what happened with the mainstream media is that, you know, we had these charges that came out from Assange, you know, on Assange, and everyone just sort of repeated them without really, you know, understanding what's at play here, and that the fact that these are, you know, orchestrated by intelligence agencies to, you know, paint this individual in a certain light. And, you know, there's got to be more responsibility for us, you know, as a kind of a wider industry before, you know, really the onus really is on us to kind of fact check things, because sometimes it can take 10, 15 years for the truth to actually come out, because, you know, that's unfortunately, you know, the types of investigation required to kind of correct the lies that come out of government often take years and years. You know, it took many years to figure out that the whole WMD scandal was a lie. We're only now, I guess for the wider majority of population, people are realizing that what took place in Syria was a lie, or all these things, they seem to come out 10 years later, but it's kind of the onus on journalists to understand propagandists to say that as soon as it's coming to them, to be able to kind of figure out what's, you know, newsworthy, what's real, and not kind of be duped into the government language, or, you know, how opinions are manipulated in certain ways.
Yeah. Do you want to say anything on that, Mo? In reference to your
I would just say that that is easier said than done, though. Like, first of all, you're supposed to have fact checkers at a news organization. So as we've been saying, the more people get cut, the more the writer, the author, the journalist has to do, the less, you know, the lower the quality is going to be, right? Especially if you're being demanded to put out multiple stories a day. I mean, like, forget about it. Like, the idea of being able to, you know, even if I was working every minute of my waking life and not brushing my teeth, if I'm having to put out stories every single day, and I'm having to, I mean, this is one of my frustrations, right? Is that I do have this issue with it. So the Canary is very good, right? The Canary will come back to me. You know, we do have sub-editors who will come back and say link whenever I make a factual statement, to the point of like irritation for me, but you know, it's good. You know, I mean, forget about it. Any kind of statistic, they always say, where's your link for this? And sometimes they'll come back, and I don't know if you've ever put in links on WordPress or what have you. Let's say for whatever reason it doesn't copy properly, and they, you know, they do pick it up. They're like, hey, this doesn't actually link.
Yeah.
Say what it is that you're saying. You reword it or give me a different source, which is, you know, and the Canary is an underfunded, completely, you know, alternative indie news outlet, right? That was created a couple of years ago. And when I've described the process to some other people, they were quite impressed actually at the process that was going on at the Canary. But it's like, I don't necessarily have that at other places, and it's a resource issue. So what ends up happening is that the dominant narrative gets steamrolled through, because it's like, you know, okay, how much time do I have? And if I'm going to question something, you know, when will I question it? Maybe I'll say the word alleged rather than simply said, because I want to, you know, at least point out the fact that it's not been corroborated. But at the same time, when you see that, quite often I'll see alleged for things like official enemies of like Britain or the United States, but just said or reported when it's like, you know, the CIA, which is hilarious because they have like such a record of lying. It's like on an unimaginable level. But I also understand the feeling that, you know, oh, well, this seems about right. You know, well, they're not going to lie about everything. And if you got deadlines and you got to put material out, and unless the newspaper, the outlet, has somebody who can chase things up per article, then it's going to be quite difficult. You know what I mean? There's certain stories that I just won't write about for certain outlets because I don't have the time to do the way I would like to do them properly, or because I know of their editorial bent, because every outlet will have its own, you know, ideological and editorial like leanings. I don't want it to be rubbish, so I just won't. So certain places I just won't write on anything Palestine related, right? Even, you know, even though that like I liked, you know, that's important to me to cover that, and it's very interesting as well. There's all kinds of angles to it. I just won't cover it for certain places because of their bent.
That's
so
heavy.
it's, you know, it's one of those things.
That's really heavy. That you can't cover Palestine because you know, it's too hard.
I won't say where.
Look, it does. You know, the elephant in the room, of course, is that, you know, the press won't, you know, the mainstream media won't actually drive home to the public what the hearing means in their freedoms. You know, in terms of what Julian represents, to the extraction of him from society and torture of him, and basically punishment by process, because, you know, all of our the Sputnik notifications are coming in. Sorry, all of the legal observers have said that, you know, and definitely will go to appeal, and then maybe another appeal where, you know, he will lose the magistrates, because obviously that's what the decision Vanessa Breitzer wants to make, because probably, you know, maybe the chief maj had something to do with that, but go to appeal, win the appeal, then US appeal again. So it seems to be like punishment by process, where, you know, a lengthy, already arbitrarily detained for 10 years, and now it's looking ahead of the lengthy further detainment if he doesn't, win a bail application in the High Court. How long will that take? So it looks like a, punishment by process to me. In the meantime, they're missing this huge story, I just beat my head against a brick wall with, as I said before. What was I going to say? My point was going to be your points about the influence by the intelligence agencies and governments, through them governments, on what can be reported on. And I know, Mo, you were working on the Meeting inquiry and the ironically titled Integrity Initiative, where the successor to the think tank funded by the lost my notes. You take over the investment. Scottish Institute for Statecraft. Scottish Institute for Statecraft. It's a mouthful.
Well, it's just registered in Scotland. It's registered as a Scottish charity, but it's based in London. So it's and it's funded by the Foreign Office. It's funded by NATO. It's funded by the Institute for Statecraft. I think it's got funding from the Smith Richardson Foundation, which itself is like a heavily neocon linked foundation. Some multimillionaire or billionaire heir to was it Vicks Vapor Rub?
Vicks Vapor Rub,
in the United States. So, but anyway, he ended up setting up this foundation, which funds all kinds of neoconservative linked groups in the United States and think tanks and what have you, and people linked to people like Will Crystal and others linked to the Project for a New American Century, etc. So that's the one of their projects is the Integrity Initiative, which seems to have closed down ever since it was revealed, ever since we've covered it, but other versions will come up, right? And one of the things that they did, or their main focus appeared to be Russia, right? It's like Russia's putting out this disinformation, it's a hostile state power, we need to counter the disinformation, right? And one of the ways we, quote unquote, are doing this is by opening up what they call clusters of notable individuals in multiple countries, now dozens of countries, right? Journalists, researchers, academics, and some names of which you'll recognize in terms of British journalists. People reported for The Guardian, one of them, or The Times. And we don't know their level of involvement. We just have seen the documents where their names are listed in different clusters and what have you. And it's interesting because the idea is that you have the seed money from government, but the idea is that eventually they become self-sustaining, and that these are people who can work together independently and together to push out counter narratives to Russia. And of course, the problem with that is that you're reading something or hearing something, you should have the right to know the source of the information. So there's nothing wrong with a member of British military intelligence coming out and saying, this is what I think. And you think, okay, this is a guy who works for British military intelligence. But if it's a journalist just putting something out or a researcher, and you're unaware that behind the scenes, he's got these links to British military intelligence and American military intelligence, and that is actually part of a concerted, organized effort, the kind of thing that Russia has been accused of doing, which they may well be doing, but it's just accusations with very little evidence in terms of Russia. What we've seen proven on the British side is far greater in terms of sophistication and funding, which is of course the irony. And of course, in terms of the coverage, Russiagate has gotten all of the coverage. So there's that. And I wrote a piece. I still have pieces that I want to put out on this, which is sort of frustrating given the fact that we broke this a year plus ago now. But people can read the article that I co-authored with Max Blumenthal at the Gray Zone Project. If you type in Integrity Initiative, you'll find it, and then that will give you a good overall picture. I also did an interview with Chris Hedges about it for RT, and people can get a good picture of it there as well. On the Meeting inquiry, I'll just mention it because I'm going to have to leave for another meeting shortly. Yeah. For people who don't know, a few years ago, when it was revealed that the mother of a murder victim, of somebody who was murdered in a racist attack, and she'd been long campaigning for justice for her son. It turns out that her conversations with her legal team were being surveilled and spied upon by the Metropolitan Police, right? Which is interesting. Why would you be spying upon the privileged legal communications of the mother of a murder victim, right? So, and when that came out, that was the straw that broke the camel's back, that resulted in enough pressure being put on then Home Secretary Theresa May, who would later become Prime Minister, to set up a public inquiry into undercover policing, specifically undercover policing that targets political groups, right? Not targeting, like, you know, Serbian mafia or what have you, right? Not infiltration of organized crime, but infiltration of, you know, trade unions, environmental groups, social justice groups, anti-war groups, arms trade campaigners, and the like. So, and that was my first ever article. Sorry, there's a notification on my computer. My first ever article for the Canary, and I was just rereading it just to prep for this. I forgot it was my first ever article, was covering a hearing of the inquiry, right? A court in the Royal Courts of Justice. And that was that May or March 2018. So, and when I wrote that article, they were complaining about how activists were complaining, victims of political policing were complaining that they were going into the 3rd year and the inquiry has yet to hear any evidence. It's all technical issues and stonewalling from the part of the police. Well, last time I checked, the inquiry, so the guy who was in charge of it at the time has died, Court of Appeal judge, right? Sir Christopher Pitchford. He's been replaced by a different judge, Mitting, John Mitting. I don't know if he's also been knighted, so I can't remember if it's Sir John Mitting. And it still has yet to actually hear evidence proper, as far as I'm aware, right? And to add to that, to add insult to injury, this guy who was chosen to replace Pitchford after he stepped down, okay, as much as Pitchford was part of the establishment, okay, he's a Court of Appeal judge, right? Mitting was a longtime chair of the Special Immigration and Appeals Commission, which is a secretive tribunal which has been likened to the Star Chamber by a parliamentary committee, because it hears evidence in secret, and it can hear evidence where the non-state participant doesn't get to see. So let's say you're suing the government on something that touches on national security. The government says touches on national security. Or you've got an immigration, you know, you're a British citizen and you've been stripped of your citizenship and you're stuck in Turkey as a tourist now and you can't get back to your own country. There can be evidence put against you by the intelligence services that the judges will hear that you won't get to hear and that your lawyer won't get to see, right? And you've got to challenge this. So this guy has sat as a chair in this tribunal, this commission, for 5 years, which basically says that he's okay with the secret state. You know what I mean? He's okay with taking the words of intelligence officers and the national security state as a you know, because you can imagine judges resigning from something like this, being like, no, what is this, like, hack kangaroo system? Forget about it, right? But he sat for 5 years as the chair, which means that he is, you know, his default position, we can assume, is to accept the legitimacy of the system. Whatever failings it may have, he accepts as legitimate. It can't be a coincidence that this is the guy who's chosen to chair the public inquiry into undercover policing. And that's the point I made in my Canary article and article for Open Democracy on that as well, where people literally stood up and they walked out of the hearing en masse and then came outside to speak to the press. Because of his refusal, he point blank originally said, we will not be revealing undercover names of police officers. He's slowly being moved on that. And it's like, okay, so that means after all this, you'll never know, you know, your best friend or what have you. And it's mostly the work of independent actors, researchers with the Undercover Research Group, and victims of political policing who, through extensive research in their own work, have revealed that certain people are actually people they knew, people they had relationships with, people children? In some cases fathered children with. Yeah, these are women, right? So who you can imagine the violation that these people experienced, where one day someone they thought they were going to get married to, that their parents knew, invited over for Christmas, had sex with, all the rest of it, just one day they just disappeared. and had no idea what happened, and start searching, and then bit by bit, they start realizing everything they ever thought they knew about them was a lie, right? So this is the thing that the undercover policing inquiry is supposed to be dealing with, also known as the Mitting inquiry after the judge. If people want to know more about that, they can check out Police Spies Out of Lives on Twitter. There's a documentary that they're making about that. The Undercover Research Group is a great resource, as I've mentioned. And there are a few others like the Network for Police Monitoring, and the Canary does excellent reporting on that. So I would strongly encourage people to go and take a look at that, because then you start to see the extent to, it helps to place Assange's treatment, or the treatment of Assange, into its wider context. It's not like most people who experience, it's not like most people have positive experiences of political policing, say, and they get justice, and it's just Assange where he's an outlier. That's what my argument is that if anything, you want to see his treatment in Belmarsh, that should tell you what it is that people are treated like in our prison system, right? People are treated like in Belmarsh prison, right? And in other prisons. I mean, I've written just with Sputnik, and I'll end on this, over the last few months, I probably put out 5 or 6 separate stories on the prison system there, each of them based on reports from the prison ombudsman or the National Audit Office or whoever. Every time I see a report, I'll go and I'll put out some of the summary into an article. And it's, the things I've been looking at over the last few years based on these reports, right? Parliamentary investigations and prison and probation inspector, etc. Record levels of inmate violence, record levels of violence between inmates and inmates and prison staff, record levels of self-harm, record levels of suicide. So this is the context that Assange is in. So it's, when people are calling for Assange to be treated better, I think people should also use that as an opportunity to call for, a reform, at the very least, reform of our criminal justice system and how it treats prisoners, as well as, defendants, accused people. Bear in mind, Assange has never been accused of anything other than skipping bail, right? So this is pretty harsh treatment he's receiving, all things considered.
Yeah.
I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Mo. Thank you so much. I'll let you scoot if you want to. And Tarek, do you have anything to add to that on the cruel and unjust punishment that the state takes out against our lives? And you have to be on watch if you're an activist.
Yeah, I mean, I think Mo made some great points there about especially some of the women that have had to deal with some of these issues. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of, it's tough to know what to say really, because it just seems like it seems to be there's kind of a failing of all our different institutions kind of happening at once. It's not kind of linked to just the courts. It's across the board seemingly. And so I think we're kind of in this, I guess, peculiar situation at the moment where everyone's kind of in lockdown, and kind of our regular rhythm of normal society has kind of been brought to a halt. So hopefully kind of in this time, we can be kind of thoughtful of everything that's got us to this point, because this perspective's got me in a bit of trouble recently, but I still feel like I have to tell the truth, is that everything that's happening with COVID-19 and the current situation is very much the doing of Western intelligence agencies. We had a news story 2 days ago, I believe, from Diliana. I'm going to murder her last name, so I'm not even going to attempt it. Diliana Gayanjeva, I think, from Arms Watch, who kind of documented how, everything, COVID-19 and other coronaviruses were being studied in Pentagon-funded biolabs. You'll not hear that perspective in any of our mainstream media, and it just shows you how dangerous it is, because we're all kind of living in this reality where we're all kind of pretty much, under lockdown. We're all kind of under house arrest, and it's because essentially people don't know the truth of what's really happening in the world. It's this very strange time where you know, for the first time, I think for most people, you know, a lot of journalists that cover Syria or the Middle East will kind of be familiar with how the government lies to the press, or the kind of these lies, or I'm sure many people here that have been tuning in will be, you know, aware of these things on a global scale. But I think for the first time, we're seeing it affect home if you're in the United States or United Kingdom. And yeah, so my perspective of the press has been that they've, again, the same thing with Assange, with Syria, with Epstein, with so many stories, we're not getting an accurate representation of why we're in this current situation or what's really happening. And, you know, I think now we're seeing how dangerous that can be. We're all kind of giving up our civil liberties, you know, to kind of to deal with this virus, you know, but we're not told that this is the virus been very much the doing of, you know, US intelligence agencies that are funded, you know, and well, this spans across so many different things, but, you know, the heavy involvement from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. No one in the mainstream media is touching that subject. You know, the Rockefeller Foundation, you know, they have their fingerprints all over this. I think I saw some reporting yesterday that these things with digital vaccines and increased surveillance and all these things were being discussed at Davos and, you know, the World Economic Forum. But it's, again, where journalists are failing in their responsibilities to hold power to account, essentially. You know, it's all you see in the mainstream media at the moment about Bill Gates is why he's the perfect man to lead us through this crisis, with just fluffy language. Or the same with, I even saw with Dr. Anthony Fauci, or the same here in England, you know, why Chris Whitty is our hero in this time of national struggle. But it makes no mention of their, you know, financial dealings or their financial conflicts of interests. And again, we get this situation where it's journalism by omission, where, you know, these details that are so crucial for us to understand, you know, the current predicament that we're in is not getting reported. But I think also it's, you know, hopefully I guess, interesting moment where a lot of people, you know, kind of seeing how the media is influencing them in a very big way. So
that's something positive, isn't it? I mean, it does, the convergence does make it sort of more, you know, illuminating, just illuminates the issues a little bit for people, because yeah, it does make you think. Really thank you for that, Tarek, and for coming today. We have to check out now because we've got some other people, but catch up with Tarek's journalism at thewatchdog.net and his news and wire service, broadcast service, and catch him on Twitter. Actually, I've got it written down here. Why don't I just show you an analog version? Is it in reverse?
Oh, that's correct.
Yeah.
Oh,
okay. So it's got the spelling on there as well. See?
Yeah.
Double D and Tarek_Haddad at Twitter. Thank you so much, Tarek.
Thank you very much.
Catch up with you when we get back to court, yeah?
Will do.
Cheers.
Okay.
Bye.
Hello, I've just realised that you're trying to unmute the wrong one. So can we unmute the good version of me? Sorry, if you're that happy.
Hello, Great. I think I can be heard now. Is that right? Can anyone confirm? Sorry about that. There's two of me because I share screen on a different computer. So, right. So we had everyone disappear really quickly there from the last stream. They didn't need to do that at all. But we have Canada starting now. We're just a couple of minutes late. I hope you don't mind, guys. And hopefully Kathy Vaughan is there to unmute you because I don't seem to have control of this anymore. So Kathy, if you're there, can you unmute, or can you guys unmute yourself? You just go to the top right. Might work. I can't seem to do it at the moment. I'm out of control. Oh, I've just been made the host. Yay. So, can you hear me now, everybody? I can now unmute Kitty and Shona and Peter. I'm so sorry about that. That took a little while to do the mechanics there because I didn't have control, but it's a pleasure to have you here. And I'm just going to do a real quick handover so that we don't lose any time. Are you guys happy to carry on like this, or do you need me to share anything while you're talking?
I think we're good, right?
Okay, I've put you on pin. I've got to unpin you. Unpin video. Sorry about that. It should relate to sound now.
Can you hear me?
Peter? Yes, go for it. Hello there, Peter. Can you hear me?
Okay, yes, I can hear you. I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
That's it. I've got you now. That's brilliant. All right. And Shona, can I hear you okay?
Can you hear me?
Can you? Yes, it's a little bit quiet. If you have a way to turn up your microphone, that would probably be a great move.
Okay, I'll try to speak louder.
Yeah, that's it. Just maybe come closer to the mic. Yeah, that's all good. All right. And last but not least, we've got Peter. And did we get Sherry?
Hello.
Oh, unmuted. Yay, there you are. So we didn't have Kitty. I thought we had Kitty. No, sorry. Okay. Well, I'm going to just let you guys go for it. All right. Thank you.
How do I get my picture up? You want my picture up there?
I see it.
You can see it? Okay.
Yeah.
You can see the video? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Who wants to start?
Well, I'll start. I'm really thrilled to be here today with all of you because we started, all of us, in different places, and we went with Unity for J, and we met through that, and over time we've sort of got to know each other in messages and encouraging one another's posts. And so I thought of us like Team Canada for Assange. So it's a thrill to actually talk to people for reals here. And we're very grateful to have Peter Bijsterfield here with us today as our guest. And Kitty Hundle as well will be coming in and audio to sort that out. But yeah, I'm really thrilled that we're finally doing this. And
maybe I'll go away and I'll make sure that Kitty can get in okay, because then I can do it behind the scenes. Yeah, okay, then I'll leave you guys to it. Well done, and thank you guys for what you do. I was expecting Steve as well, but was he just organizing it?
Yeah,
as well
Steve,
with you guys.
Gotta give a big shout out to Steve.
Yeah, definitely. Oh my God, he's my main contact in Canada. You and Sherry, yeah, Steve and Sherry, definitely.
And I remember him going out there in Toronto in the rain by himself to start.
Yeah.
And Miss Assange Christine always sent him I think it was him or others that she said, you know, the power of one, like, let's get this going. And he's been a real keeper on this too. And he also organized, has contacted a number of journalists in Canada. So, and contacted Peter as well. So I think I'm going to throw it over to you, Peter. I'm pleased to meet myself, being an advocate for Julian, but also, you know, your background in documentaries and writing for Now magazine. So I'm a musician. And
where are you located, Sherry?
I'm in Victoria, BC.
Oh, cool, cool.
I
I'm in
have a
Toronto.
metal band that does protest music, so I'm going to be
Yeah,
asking about
yeah.
that when comes my turn. And also, I like making these clips for Unity for J as well, and we wrote our own music. So
Jam for Julian, isn't it? Jam for Julian.
yeah, we did a jam for Julian. We
Yeah.
did a concert for Julian.
Yeah.
I've got a letter from Christine Assange that she gave us to read at the concert, but I'd really like to hear from Peter to start and maybe come back to me and tell the story or whatever you think's good.
Well, thank you, New Zealand, for having us. It's fabulous. As you can tell, at the Canadian side, like I'm finding it's pretty thin in terms of you know, we see the videos coming from the outside of Belmarsh Prison in London. We see people in Sydney and Melbourne lined up en masse, and I look at our own feeble efforts, what we've been able to manage. But what we have been able to manage has been through Steve, as you said, and that's how I got to know about the Unity for J, the Toronto chapter. I'm an independent journalist myself, and so I come at this out of frustration. I come out of the same journalism education as most of the people I see on TV or whose copy I read in the papers. So I'm looking at former colleagues, former mentors, people who've taught me in journalism school, and former students once I got to be of the vintage where I turned the tables on them. And I see very little education. I'm saying people are not educated on the Assange file, on the WikiLeaks file. I would have thought that because of the place where we are in journalism history, where journalism is being made into a criminal offense, at least accountability journalism, the kind of journalism that exposes the dark secrets and actions through whistleblowing, that kind of journalism seems to be under threat. And if you're living in Canada, you wouldn't have a sense of that. You would have to dig really deep to find it out. And thank God for social media and the actions and activities in other jurisdictions, the constant Twitter feed of information, and the Unity for J Consortium News, what Australia is doing. Like I said, we're hungry. We don't have that. I can back up a little bit. We're talking about things like umbrella organizations not even giving a, well, I shouldn't say not giving a shout out at all. There's the Canadian Association of Journalists for one, and Canadian Journalists for Free Expression. You expect them to be kind of leading this. But the only thing we've ever got, and to give them credit, I'll just read out a statement from the Canadian Association of Journalists the day after Assange got arrested. And here it is. Hang on a second. Bear with me. I had it all queued up, of course, and when it comes time for the... Yeah, so the Canadian Association of Journalists said that they're... Bear with me here. I just lost it again. Okay.
You want to look for that for a minute and pick up, or I could say hello to Shona.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. I'll line up a couple of things. I'll just quickly wrap up, and then I might read a couple of things later.
Okay.
So I'm finding very no support by a journalism community per se. No taking advantage of this opportunity to teach to this attack on journalism freedom to journalism students. None of that is going on. But what has been going on in the coverage has been in Canada like everywhere else. If it's not a smear job, then the information that is coming out seems very undereducated, like they didn't do the research. So when you see somebody reporting on the public broadcaster CBC, for example, you get a sense, it sounds like bubblegum journalism, to be honest. And you don't have a sense at all that they're at all concerned about the breaches, what's going on, the way Craig Murray is reporting it in the actual courtroom and the blow by blow. You don't have any kind of sense that Canadian journalists are each actually invested in that. So they're giving you maybe just the facts, man, but they're not really the facts. You still have references to rape charges, those kinds of things. So when they're misreporting live on their own reporting, it is not complete, and you don't see it very often at all. And what you do see, you see Associated Press and Reuters reports posted to Canadian broadcasters' websites, and they're being allowed to stand with the inaccuracy unchallenged. So that's the general picture I wanted to paint in terms of the status of reporting on Assange and the importance of WikiLeaks. It's just it's a desert in the Great White North. And I'll look for what the Canadian Association of Journalists has said. Well, you can go ahead.
Yeah, it's like you have to educate even just people you know, because they aren't hearing any facts on this, or the journalists aren't speaking about it in the mainstream media and even social media platforms that have a platform. So I start really getting after them to get on this, at least, is one idea. Jonah, do you want to say hello and maybe speak to some of this yourself?
Yes, I'm here as a mother, a grandmother, and I started with Twitter and just not knowing where I was going. And I found Julian Assange's case and just felt compelled to follow what was happening. And I was astounded at, and nothing, I find it very hard to persuade anyone to be interested on Facebook, or Twitter's fine for me, but Facebook is not. Nothing. If I post anything about Julian, nobody likes it, or they just ignore it. It seems.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. We have to find a way to get this out there and find a strategy for Canadians. And it is upsetting when you say I was compelled, and I grew up in Winnipeg, and as Peter was talking about, what's going on here, because us Canadians, I can ask you in a second, Peter, but us Canadians, I think most of us were raised with that ethic of, wow, if you see some evil happening, especially coming from those of us whose parents and grandparents were in World War I, World War II, we were raised with that ethic. Like, if you see this, and if, we stand on guard for thee, and you could take that how you want. But I was really surprised, honestly. Why are we here? Where is everybody?
Yeah.
Why am I here? Like, I'd rather somebody like Peter, more people like Peter were here.
Well, why everybody coming up? Wait a minute,
No, you're right. But I found it particularly shocking within the journalism community. Here's what the day after the arrest, I had been writing the Canadian Association of Journalists for over a year. I was a card-carrying member, and I just I got a notice in the mail saying that my membership due was to be renewed, and I said, no, thank you. I'm not going to have it renewed until I get a sense that you're fighting this fight on behalf of accountability journalism, about security journalism, the kind of journalism that is not allowed to operate right now because we're politicizing it. Julian Assange is being made a political prisoner. So I laid on this umbrella organization what they weren't paying attention to. And about a year before the arrest, as you remember, the situation between Assange and the embassy deteriorating fast, and he was basically predicting his own demise there, both in terms of health, in terms of security, and so on and so forth. And I couldn't get anybody to pay attention to that, even though they have an advocacy chapter in their organization, as do many, advocating on behalf of press freedoms, but they just wouldn't come out of the woodwork. But on the morning after the arrest, they wrote this: as a result, the Canadian Association of Journalists is calling on the United States to drop its attempt to extradite Assange. The Canadian Association of Journalists has a number of concerns about the recent actions against Assange. Among them, the Canadian Association of Journalists is concerned that federal prosecutors keep the indictment and charges scaled until after Assange's arrest in the United Kingdom on April 11th, which was an unnecessary act which lacked transparency. However, of concern to the CAJs are parts of the indictment that link the charges to other acts which are normal journalistic practices and should be protected by First Amendment rights. For example, the indictment states that it was part of a conspiracy for Assange to encourage Chelsea Manning to provide information and records from departments and agencies of the United States. And here's what they say: newspapers' rights to publish leaked classified papers was established by the courts as a First Amendment right in 1971, when the New York Times published parts of the Pentagon paper. So they say encouraging sources to leak information that is in the public interest to the media is a basic practice of journalism which must be defended, said Karen Puglisi, who is the head of the Canadian Association of Journalists. I think she was given an invitation to participate here. But so you get a sense, so they crossed their T's and they dotted their I's, but you know, they haven't been heard from since. Been knocking on their door saying, you know, what about your journalists? And the head of the organization, of the umbrella organization, says some of our journalists are right behind Assange, and some of them are still mad at him for leaking the DNC and letting Trump in and keeping Hillary out. That's the basic thinking, you know. So that's basically what you're up against, is that there's a sort of correctness that they're willing to participate with, but they're not leading this particular charge to, you know, to knock down, I mean, at least they scream at the system for being so draconian in its treatment of Assange and by extension press freedom itself. So that was very disappointing. That was from an umbrella organization that just hasn't taken not one little step except that one.
Can I ask you a question, Peter? Did you see the video of Mark Davis when he showed the video of Julian in the Guardian office years ago? Julian was in the Guardian office talking with David Lee and what's his name?
What was this in regard to? Was this in regard to the unprotected sources?
Just before they leaked the Afghan, when they were about to leak the Afghan papers, Julian spoke to the Guardian, and they were all over him. They thought he was wonderful, and they were helping him. And then they disowned him after that.
Yeah.
Do you see that video?
I didn't see the video, but I get the sense of
it's
echoing what I came up against when I didn't get response from the journalism advocacy groups, the journalism umbrella groups, or even journalism schools. They all turned out to be singing from the same hymnal, which had to do with what I think you're talking about, is that, well, he was a reckless publisher who endangered people's lives and so on and so forth. And that's one of the reasons that they were no longer proud of him. Like you said, they were all over him at the beginning, but then abandoned him. I think that was one of the reasons they thought of him as this reckless publisher. And as it's been disclosed many times and been written about many times, is that, you know, WikiLeaks has this flawless record, and that particular redaction process actually was laid at the feet of the Guardian itself. I don't want to get into the details because I'm not up to them totally, but is that what you were referring to? Is that what you were talking about, how they once loved them and now they're ready to
yeah, they collaborated with him, and they were going to all publish the Afghan war logs. They were all going to publish at the same time, and they said it was going to be done on a Monday morning, and Julian said we have to redact people's names. So he worked and he redacted about 2,000 names, all from the Friday, from one night to the next morning. He worked all night on it, redacting the names. And then the Afghan war logs, something went wrong, and the WikiLeaks could not publish on the Monday morning. And the New York Times, El País, and the Guardian were going crazy because they had got their front page all set up to publish. And WikiLeaks wasn't able to publish for another 2 days after that. And the press was really angry about that. But Julian was the one who cared about the people. He was the one who cared about redacting and the people's names. So they threw him under the bus.
Yeah, I think that's generally the, and the reporting is still on that vein, even though that has been, you know, that's been debunked. And like what you're explaining it now, the actual events of that story are out there now. But if you look at, I'm going to keep getting back to Canadian reporting, or lack of it. First of all, there's very little of it, and you've never heard what you just said coming out of any Canadian journalist's mouth in terms of research or backing up that particular event. And that's again one of the many disappointing elements in this whole thing, is that it's, you know, I wish there were other Canadian journalists on this panel here whose brains I could pick, because I've tried it directly. There were people who, like CBC was one of the partners of WikiLeaks and reported based on the diplomatic cable leaks. And I wanted to get back to some of those reporters and ask them, you know, where do you stand? And they just won't get back. These were people who actually reported. Like, I'll give you an example of a story that was worth looking at. The a CBC journalist by the name of Greg Weston did a story in, I think it was 2013, that based on the WikiLeaks cable releases, said that the moment that Canadian officials were publicly saying that they would not join the coalition of the willing in the Iraq War, the moment that they were saying that and appearing to be distancing themselves from that war, there was already military cooperation going on, where Canadian and American military are so intertwined through NATO and other proximities that they were already lining up and helping them in the Mediterranean with getting their battleships lined up and that kind of stuff. So Canadians were right in the thick of it, saying one thing publicly. We would never have known this if it wasn't for WikiLeaks, right? So I go to the Canadian journalists who wrote that story. He won't be heard from me. He won't even acknowledge the fact that I emailed him. And I did this a couple of times with other people, other Canadian journalists who had been partnering in these WikiLeaks releases. I asked them, you know, what do you know about how the sausages are made? And he says, yeah, I know how the sausages are made, but I'm not prepared to talk about it, you know? So and that's one thing. But then if you are reporting, I mean, why do you continue to insist that Assange was hiding from rape charges? You know, how can that still be in your reporting today? You know, how come you are not there in terms of the research and the facts of the case, especially the way they were reported very intimately by Craig Murray, who gave you a blow-by-blow of what was going on in the courtroom, the taking away of Assange and Assange's lawyers their rights to actually present the case, to have access to the documents. None of that made it into the news, made it into the reportage. There was a CBC reporter that comes out in front of Belmarsh prison, and she talked to some of the protesters and stuff, but she never went inside the courtroom to do what Craig Murray did. But on their website, the CBC still posted a wrong and inaccurate and a smearing tone of a report from Associated Press. In other words, they're not willing to do their own research and their own reportage. They don't even think of this as an assault on journalism. They still think it's about whether Assange is a good guy or a bad guy and needs to be put away. You know, it's just, sorry to go on, but it's such a frustrating thing. That's what brings me here, that there's no reporting on that on Canadian media, not any news outlets that we know of. I don't know if you've heard of any.
I would say that we have a problem with a media blackout in general. Like most people know, these 6 networks and all this that own the media, the same crowd that Julian has exposed the crimes and the anti-war movement is really missing from this country. They're all on about all kind, whatever's coming across being churned out. It amounts to propaganda, in my view, really. A lot of but I think, yes, what you're doing needs to be done by more people, right? Like more people putting pressure on journalists anyway. Yeah. Even if that's coming down the pipe to them, oh, you better not. Well, maybe we put more pressure on them as a strategy, do you think?
Well, that's one of the things I thought I'd come to this event to see if we can do some brainstorming around. I see some other jurisdictions, they're writing letters to their MPs. I think Australia actually has a journalism federation that is in behind this. There seems to be some energy from the journalism community itself. How do we do that? Like everybody I've run into, these are leaders in the Canadian journalism scene as educators or journalists themselves. They just won't be heard from. They won't be heard from. So
yeah,
I don't know what it takes. Anybody got any ideas? New Zealand?
Where's Alex? She's off having a nap, I think.
Yeah, I follow.
Sorry, I heard my name. Did you want me?
I was asking you a question.
Sorry, it was how is it in New Zealand with the media? Because I just heard you saying, was it just saying that Australia was good? Did you say?
No, I was saying both. I mean, and we're asking for, since we're on the feed, on the New Zealand feed, like I said, in Canada, we're scratching our heads about how to mobilize, especially the journalism community, considering the whole story is an assault on press freedom and on journalism itself. So I'm wondering what are other jurisdictions doing to mobilize and to get just even some visibility out there, let alone a march of some sort.
Well, we did speak to Perth on our 11th of April, and I was really impressed because he had such an amazing, and also Alison Mason, who people have heard before, low-tech solutions, faxing, printing out paper, going to media offices and standing outside with signs and talking nicely and politely to the people that work there, but just challenging them on some facts. I think we were talking before about when we were used to be able to go to events, and this was something put out on Unity 4J channels, was let's go and do some rogue speeches or questions, awkward questions at question time. Get yourself into the reception of a media company and actually demand to see one, follow up a letter with an actual visit. Obviously that's a bit moot at the moment. So all these things have been attacked, and now there was a discussion about getting MPs on board through local Zoom meetings, and for us to stop thinking so global in some ways, although this is all lovely how we can all do like a little bit in every country, but to start thinking on a suburban scale of activism.
Yeah.
But in terms of actually getting through to the media, in terms of New Zealand, the two people that I had, plus the Maori radio, which is national, have aired me. As many people know, my story is that Radio New Zealand, after I said, look, New Zealand's just organised a protest in 62 cities, we helped instigate it anyway, put it all down and listed it. And they said, oh, this is old news. And I said, well, I sent press releases, and they asked me to spell Assange. Right, and this was the news desk. This was 3 or 4 people and a professed journalist I was speaking to, and I just couldn't actually believe it. I said, can I speak to someone else? I couldn't carry on the conversation because I'd already gone through enough people to get to someone that was supposedly going to be able to talk to me about news. So yeah, it was appalling. Here in Australia, I think we're exposed through our algorithm and through our amazing supporter networks. We're given the feeling that we've got a massive amount of people saying the same stuff as us, but it's not the case. And a lot of people like the puppy dogs and rainbows, and they just don't want to hear the truth of the matter.
Yeah. No, that's a. So no, I was going to chime in. I was going to echo that I was very much shocked myself when I approached I was doing a piece for an outlet called Canada Land here, who looks at itself as a media criticism platform, journalism platform, and I respect them, and I was putting a piece together for them, and they ended up publishing it. Now, one of the sources I went to, a couple of sources I went to, were journalism educators, people who run journalism schools. And they basically echoed what you did. They didn't ask how to spell Assange, but it was pretty close to that, Sometimes they were just out of the picture altogether. And let alone what was going on in Belmore's courtroom that on a particular day, just didn't have a clue. Or the implications of it, the implications of withholding evidence, in withholding the kind of resources that any defendant would need to put his or her case forward. That basic fundamental right was withdrawn in Belmarsh. So get them to pay attention to that. Are you kidding me? They were just out to lunch. So there's a lot of work to do. So that's why the frustration, the grasping for straws. I like the idea of showing up. Yes, showing up on the premises. Yeah, no.
Well, following up a letter or an email or both, if you can. The other thing is mass. We do have the ability to come from several countries and all hit one MP, not hit, but hit with facts an MP and focus on a different one each week. And I think Truman raised that idea, and Alison also is a really good person to speak to. Alison Mason from London Candles for Assange, and also from JADC, works with Emmy, everyone. She's just done an epic job at the last interview. I don't know if you saw it, but she has a great deal of names of the real key players, particularly in England, Australia, that can actually make decisions that would make a difference. So the other thing is stars. Where are they? Stars, personalities, they're letting us down in a big way.
I've called Pamela Anderson, but yeah.
No, but she's
I mean, she's been wonderful, and she's written some beautiful stuff, and she's gone there. I'm really you can't really fault. I mean, you can't really fault these people who are standing up. We need, and this always comes down to, do we do name and shameless? We need a name and shameless of the worst journalists and the worst of the worst, anti-fans, whatever you want to call them, but the people that profess lies constantly without looking into it.
I've tried to do, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just qualifying, I was just sort of making a joke about that, but yeah, I don't expect her to call me back, but Pamela's been great, so we have her, and I'm sure she's got more things lined up to do with around the world more internationally.
I think we need.
She has talked to Trudeau, which, you know, she's
forget about it. I think maybe the kind of stars we're talking about are journalism stars, people who are supposedly respected, the people that come into your living rooms and expound on the news. And I've tried a couple, you know, contacting them directly, calling them on leaving incorrect Assange reporting on their website, just because it's by Associated Press or Reuters doesn't mean you shouldn't be vetting it, but they have no interest in that. So I believe in the direct action. I think we'll take that advice, taking some banners directly in front of CBC or CTV or the Globe and Mail, and knocking on a few doors. You know, I think that's it. But it's a really hard it's a hard fight here. There's in the Great White North. It's barren in terms of support. You know.
It is. And I mean, I always complain about Nicky Hager here in New Zealand as well. Completely missed that he partly organised with Serena Tenari, who was on earlier, that massive speak up for Julian. I do think one area where there might be some light is surely British justice, the legal system, the lawyers, the criminal system cannot actually watch this happen. It's too much of a farce. It is. And I'm feeling like the lawyers for Assange people, we've got wonderful letter from Dr. Assange. We can share that. We can, you know, we can correct the record of the media, definitely. But, you know, I think we can push it a little bit further. Do you think so?
Needs to be. I mean, we don't have a choice. But I think you're right. That might be where the encouragement lies. Is that the UK's own judiciary, if they took a look at what's going on there directly, they would be embarrassed. You know, they would shut that down the same way that the Swedish Department of Justice shut down that so-called investigation. There just was nothing there, right? In terms of the so-called the allegations there. So if the UK, but you know, when you look at the bigger picture, the UK's hand-holding with the DOJ, a US Department of Justice, that's the scary part. You know, where they're not operating in isolation. Do we not get a sense that the judge, is it Baretzer, seems is not an independent individual, right? So that's the scary part where, you know what I mean? So
well, she's still overseen, isn't she, by the same judge that we know is literally tied to military complex and weapon sales and implicated in many WikiLeaks documents.
Yeah. So
I mean, then there's the fact they threw out Article 4. Then there's the fact that the Queen said it was political. Then there's the fact that they said it didn't matter that it was political. Then it's like the glass box. There's no end to the ridiculousness. And then you get to the health and the human rights and the everything else. It's strange because surely all journalists want to fight for the industry. I cannot understand this attitude. Like, I mean, surely journalism schools must be just not getting any students. I can't understand how anyone would go when they see how controlled they have to be. You know, I know people have got to make a living, but what are you actually saying? You're saying, oh, I'm just going to turn a blind eye, my children will deal with this later. Like I keep on coming back to, I can't imagine doing that.
Well, that's
not
exactly
worth money.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm scratching my head about. What are you sitting on? And I mean the standard response, of course, or the standard rationale is that I'll never have access to those kinds of sources again if I stand on the wrong side of this issue. That minister will never talk to me again. I will never get that interview again.
Like Epstein, when they wouldn't let they wouldn't let them cover the royal wedding. I mean, you know, that is the epitome of the problem with the media and the problem with the class that doesn't realize how much we've all turned against them because they've put us in algorithm bubbles.
Well, your use of the word class is very, very good here because I found, like, when I went to journalism school, yes, it was a class, but not the sort of class that looks down on another class, but the class that is comfortable with the reportage through the capitalist lens. It's always through the capitalist lens because they're already there. They already function at at a high social level and an economic level where that's the only thing that's worth fighting for. I mean, that's what gets most of the coverage and most of, like, we just recently had a series of, I don't know, don't want to call them political protests, but that's how they look to the public, where a lot of indigenous community wanted to put a stop to a pipeline going through a certain part of British Columbia, and they stood in its way because not all indigenous people in that area, nations had gotten, had given permission for this to happen. Long story short, so there were a bunch of solidarity protests across the countries, people blocking the railroad lines and standing at intersections and not allowing traffic, and shutting the economy down as it related to train travel. And the reporting that followed was about the economy. It wasn't about the land rights or about the concerns of the nations on the ground. It was about, well, how could they do this? How could they do this? You know, so it's a, and so that class, that journal is already entrenched there. You know, how are you going to change that around? So there's independent journalism, and there are exceptions to the rule where people will actually give you a real good insight. But as a whole, most of Canada reads what is on the public broadcasters' nightly news, and that's what they get, is that very economic capitalist lens of reportage, where you never really understand what's going on at grassroots. And that's what's missing in this here as well. There's nobody reporting on the dangers, the imminent danger to press freedom and to this kind of journalism, the kind of journalism that is driven by whistleblowers and their safety of being able to call out government wrongdoing and the ability to be able to do that. That's what's in danger. And I don't see anybody in Canada reporting on that, not even a whisper.
I wouldn't think that you should think you're alone. And I mean, we're all Five Eyes countries, we're all 42 Eyes, and it just feels like we really are in a position where we're all complicit in the wars, and that's why we're never going to be able to comment on them unless we take a stand. And how we make that serious for people, how we make them see that. I mean, I tell everyone, stop watching TV. It's okay for local news maybe, but just stop it. You know, stop reading those papers. You're actually giving your advertising worth to the military complex. If you look at it in terms of information, surveillance, capitalism, all that stuff, it's really, that's what you're doing. But also more than that, without even knowing it, you're giving them a bit of your you're giving them a bit of your narrative in your brain without you even realizing. There'll be something convenient that you'll parrot off to someone else. You won't have a clue what it will mean, but something, you know, I've had my husband come home and tell me about how Julian has been told he can't look after kitty litter. And if anyone should know, do you know, he was just proud that he had some news on Julian. And that's the irony, is that I tell him all the news on Julian, and then that's the news I get from him. And it's not that he's not a supporter, he believes in free press, he helps me being able to do this, you know, but at the same time, you know, that's what I got. And I was so taken aback by it. I've had many of those kind of conversations with friends and people that just, it does blow you away, because we all live in our little algorithm bubbles and we all talk to each other, don't we? We're all, you know, like we've all talked to each other on Chatty Chat all the time and trying to kind of scheme up with campaigns. So, you know, we're a real community, and there's a lot of love and a lot of people all trying to help, but it is very challenging when there's such information warfare going on.
Yeah, when you're a journalist yourself, like I'm semi-retired, and I've never done that kind of public accountability journalism. Well, not for a while. In any case, when you come up against editors, like I'll give you a quick read. So I pitched this story after I read Craig Murray's report from the Belmarsh courtroom there, and him saying that he didn't see any of what he saw in the courtroom in the papers that night or anywhere. And I know that Canadian public broadcaster CBC has a couple of people in London when I saw that they didn't send anybody over there, I said, okay, I'll pitch a piece to an editor called of the National Observer who really fancy themselves as accountability type journalism group. And this is what I get back from the editor.
Hey, Peter, before you do that, I'm not going to stop you. I'm just going to say there's 8 minutes before we have to hand over to Deepa for Scotland. Just keeping you on the time.
Okay,
Randy Critico has just turned up on our stream just for us to hand it over. Maybe we can do some chat in between the shows, and then he can come back on for when Mexico's on.
Okay.
But yes, please just carry on. I just wanted to give you a little time-sensitive thing.
So this is a piece that I pitched about the updating Assange's story after the extradition hearings proceedings started to kickstart in last year, and this is what she wrote back. Assange is a programmer and a hacker, but never worked as a journalist. You're framing of the issue as a journalism freedom issue, and it is perhaps because protecting whistleblowers is important, but to society, not just journalism. For me, this is still a problem in your framing. What are your thoughts on this? What the fuck? You know what I mean? So I got something written. She ended up publishing it because I had to answer every one of those questions. I had to trot out the journalism awards. I had to trot out, the importance to journalism, all that stuff. I mean, I'm educating an editor of a national journal who fancies themselves as a public accountability journalist. Anyways, I'm just venting my own frustration here. But
I think we all sympathize, don't we, everybody? Yeah. And I mean, there are some fine journalists out there that are doing some work, and we need to give them Patreon fees, and we need to not be giving that money to NGOs, because I'm sorry, I shouldn't say this probably, but I don't.
Well, I hear you.
I know we're supposed to be grateful. Yay, Amnesty! Thank you.
Okay, just on that point, I'll leave it on that point. I did in 2011, after the Haiti earthquake. I was there with a bunch of students. We were there right after the earthquake. We were there for 2 weeks, and the long and short of it is that there have been NGOs in Haiti since 1947, and the country is 45% poorer now than it was then. You know what I mean? That's decades of NGO support.
Yeah. So, I mean, at one point, Julian had written a letter and said that wouldn't it be great if we all did a little bit more NGOs, or maybe standing outside Le Monde and doing that sort of stuff. It was a suggestion of his, but some people have just lost hope in that, in some senses.
Yeah.
I feel. Anyway, listen, there's Shona and Sherry, thank you so much for bringing this team together and sorting out Canada for us, because I haven't literally done anything. I haven't really even